All right, everybody. All right. We got a lot of supers to talk about real quick. Hold on. First, let's get the stream likes up to 50 real quick. Let's get the stream likes up to 50. We got a lot to talk about this stream. What the hell? All right. Tio Treviso. Thanks for the 5. Is Croc clearly a good candidate for high-tier Conquerors hockey? He attacked Whitebeard, Akainu, Doflamingo, etc. No problem. I think he's above first mate tier right now. Look, the way that I view characters as making sense for Conquerors hockey, I think everything that Crocodile displayed during the Marineford War is classic Conquerors hockey behavior. So he's a character that I would not be surprised if he had Conquerors hockey. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think there's characters that... Because there's lots of characters in One Piece that display Conquerors hockey type behavior, but Oda might not necessarily give it to them simply because it doesn't make sense for where they're at in the story. So, for example, Wiper obviously should have crazy strong Conquerors hockey, but Oda's writing him at around the same level as Luffy at that point in time, right? So Oda's not going to have Wiper be revealed to have Conquerors hockey before like Luffy or Zoro or whoever is revealed to have Conquerors hockey. So... whereas if Wiper was a character introduced post-time skip, then of course he would have Conquerors hockey. So Crocodile does not fall under that category because Crocodile is a character that obviously is now a New World player, right? And just look at his mentality, his attitude, his fearlessness, the way that he, his vision, right? Like it all fits, his vision, his ambition, his drive, it all does fit a Conquerors hockey user. Maybe he was a latent Conquerors hockey user, or maybe he had it, but then his spirit was crushed so badly in the New World that he lost it for some period of time. Who knows? But he is a character that if Oda were to reveal that he is Conquerors hockey, I think it would make a lot of sense. Let's get the stream likes up to 50 real quick. Young Smokey, thanks for the 10. None of the characters in the thumbnails are MVPs. It's Kuma, end of discussion, saved Nika Luffy. Did he do that at God Valley? And Davy Blackbeard here as well as 500 souls. Do we value saving fodder? No! Kuma's not in the MVP discussion. In fact, I'm seeing multiple Kuma comments. Gross Ray got thanks for the 2. Came here just to say that Kuma is the MVP of God Valley. Yeah, if you're fodder, who gives a fuck about the fodder? Listen, we got bigger stuff to talk about here. Kuma's not in the... Oh my god. Young Smokey, thanks for the 50. Oh my god. All right. Now I have to take this discussion seriously. Hold on. All right, we got to take this discussion seriously. I appreciate the 50. Thank you very, very, very much for the contribution. I can't say that super amounts will sway things. That's a bad precedent to set. But now I do have to address this more in depth. All right, I appreciate the contribution. Thank you very much. The stream is all in good fun. Don't take any opinions here too seriously. But... let's get into it. Okay, so Kuma is the MVP of God Valley. Lol, did I end the debate? All right. Is Kuma the MVP of God Valley? One, it's just not a fun discussion in the first place because Kuma's whole storyline generally takes place back in 1096 or whatever. I was thinking it'd be more fun to approach God Valley from, the perspective of the storyline that we just read, which is, the last 6 chapters have all been the actual God Valley incident between the big players, the Roger Pirates, Rocks Pirates, Garp's Fleet, God's Knights, yada yada. I find it more fun to approach it from that perspective because Kuma's story is something that happened way back. He didn't have some important quick cameo appearance here in the Rocks flashback version of the God Valley retelling, but it's just... that's not fun, because it's just like, the idea is that we're reviewing the story that just happened. Does that make sense? So even if you don't like I want to disqualify Kuma from the rankings, because it just makes for a less fun discussion. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's more interesting to review the actual events of the story that just took place. We can give Kuma a side award. Which is like, I don't know, We'll figure it out. We'll give him some recognition or something. But it's just not take this as for the sake of a fun discussion, right? We want to go back through the events of the story that we just read. Does that make sense? Motherly Love 619, thanks for being a Yonko tier member for 21 months. This stream will just come down to Rocks versus Kuma. And what are your thoughts on Akainu's backstory not being tied to God Valley so far? Think that's better in my opinion. I was worried that that Akainu's story would be tied heavily to dragons. Worried in the sense that I just don't think that those two characters... I much prefer the idea that Luffy and Akainu, that's where the real animosity is. That's what's been built up. That's what I want to see. Pirates versus Marines. Dragon's enemy isn't even the Marines. I mean, he doesn't like the Marines for what he's seen, obviously, but his enemy, he's made clear, is the Celestial Dragons. That's what his real beef is with. So I did worry at points because, like, there's so many similarities, right? Like, Dragon and Akainu, both the same age, right? Which is a big deal. They both were Marine recruits early on. Same age, same sort, like, Dragon's the leader of the revolutionary force. Akainu's the leader of the military force that is technically in place to uphold the established power. You can imagine those two leaders having very, very different views, just obviously on justice, right? So I personally am not interested in seeing the story turn into Akainu versus Dragon because I think that there's been so much more built up for Akainu versus Luffy. Yeah, Akainu's backstory not being tied to God Valley, I think is good. I think that makes sense because whatever Akainu's backstory is, it has to be tied to an incident where pirates are evil, right? Like, pirates are shown to be, like, really, really fucking evil, right? The God Valley incident wouldn't really make sense to... Because look at who God Valley radicalized. The characters that God Valley radicalized were characters like Dragon, right? A character coming in who is able to experience the evils of the Celestial Dragons, the evils hidden inside the Marines, and then that turns him against the system, right? So God Valley is an incident that establishes the path for Dragon to turn against the world government, right? Roger, Garp, these are also characters that have some takeaways from God Valley that, like, okay, there's a deeper problem in the world that needs to be dealt with, right? Akainu, it's the opposite. Akainu's current worldview is, no matter what, pirates are just so terrible and evil that they need to be destroyed, right? They are the true evil of the world. So Akainu's backstory needs to be an incident, assuming we get Akainu's backstory, it needs to be an incident that's somewhat the reverse of God Valley, an incident where you see just how terrible pirates can be, and that's what radicalizes Akainu to become, you know, the extremely staunch, hardcore, absolute justice type figure that he is, where he allows for no exceptions in terms of his journey to exterminate evil, right? Makes it, yeah, like God Valley just, it would, if you have God Valley and then you have an incident where, like, Akainu seeing the Marines be the ones to harm all these civilians and do all of this stuff at the behest of the Celestial Dragons, that doesn't really make sense as, like, turning Akainu into the person that he is today. Meek6173, thanks for the 5. Underdog picks, Ginny and Morgans. If not for them, Rocks, etc. wouldn't even come to God Valley. Okay, I don't know. That's not MVP stuff, but I guess they're underdog picks. All right, we got a lot of characters in the mix. It looks like a lot of people want to support the Kuma Ginny type faction. Sifa238, thanks for the 6. You still into the Garling strongest Gorosei agenda? I think Garling will be the strongest Gorosei. I think just in terms of general importance, that's how he's being portrayed. But I do think that this puts a pretty hard cap on the Gorosei. It does make sense. It does make sense. We're going to do a new top 30 after this flashback wraps. I think that'll be just in time for the end of the year, so I'm pretty excited for that. So a new top 30 will come after this flashback wraps. The Garling Gorosei stuff, it makes sense simply because with the Gorosei and Celestial Dragons, characters who are basically puppets of Imu, they fundamentally can't be as strong conquerors haki-wise as... I think this is just like a recurring thing that Oda's done throughout the story, which is the strongest characters, conquerors haki-wise, are always going to be characters who... like, that's why the Yonko are so strong. The Pirate King type figures, Roger and Whitebeard, are so strong. They're going to be the characters who basically carve their own path and become, like, they don't... Like, they follow their force of will, right? And carve that out for themselves in the world. So that makes sense. I definitely overestimated the Gorosei. I think they'll still be very difficult to deal with because of their abilities and their regeneration and yada yada. Their zone powers, and they're still strong Conqueror's Haki fighters, it seems. But I think that ultimately Oda is always going to portray the Yonko type figures as being above that. And by Yonko figures, I'm talking about like the Shanks, Kaido, Whitebeard types, even Big Mom, right? I think that having that individualistic force of will is ultimately going to be more important. Even just seeing the way that Garling dealt with rocks. Garling probably has Conqueror's Haki and stuff, but like the fact that he was willing to just knife rocks like that after rocks is already defeated, no character with pride and a strong sense of will would do that. That's why you see there's such a gap between Rocks and Garling, right? In terms of like Rocks just being able to deal with Garling with pretty much no issues. I do think that, and that's why like the only Marine that Oda has ever portrayed as being a Conqueror's Haki monster is Garp, because Garp is basically like, it's even spelled out in the story. Well, Garp's like a pirate within the Marines. Like Rocks even says that straight up. Garp is different than all the Marines, therefore Garp is a Conqueror's Haki monster. But all the other Conqueror's Haki monsters in the story, they're all outside the world government sphere. And that makes a lot of sense, just thematically speaking. Characters who could be an exception, maybe Akainu, if he chooses to rebel or something like that. I could see him awakening his Conqueror's Haki. I would not be surprised if he's already awakened his Conqueror's Haki, so we could see that. Yeah. Elias Taveras, thanks for the 5. Please let us get back to the Straw Hat Crew. Flashback storytelling is different. I mean, Kinemon didn't die and the raid didn't fail. Wait, what? Why is flashback storytelling different? You don't like the flashbacks? I don't understand the comment as much. Flashback story. I don't think I understand the comment fully. Flashback storytelling is different. I don't fully understand the comment. Warkiri had a pretty decent Conqueror's feat. Yeah, I agree. It was pretty impressive. It was very impressive. Let's get the stream likes up to 50 real quick. Let's get the stream likes up to 50. Kind is 55, bro. Let it go. Hey, you could still have what do you call? You could still have awakenings and shit. I don't think that there's an age limit necessarily. I do think that there is a trend in One Piece that most characters are probably at their prime by like late 30s, specifically around 38, 39, stuff like that. Heroes Striker Neo 5516, thanks for the 10. Hey Mord, was curious about your thoughts on the recurring themes of conflicting responsibility last chapter. Harold to his kingdom, and Rocks and Garp to the Marines, and his own morals. Sick writing. Yeah, I think that there's a lot to piece out, especially between Rocks and Harold. I think the storyline between those two and the full contrast that'll play out by the end of this flashback is really, really cool and has a lot of interesting messaging to it. I almost wanted to do... So, tomorrow's video that comes out is a Rock-centric video. I think it's a really strong video. It's an analysis of the character, and particularly a lot of the things that Oda was saying with his death. There's a Rocks and Harold video that I also want to do very soon. So, we need to see how Harold's full story plays out first, but I think Oda's juxtaposition between those two characters and how these two unlikely friends basically went different paths, I think that there's a lot that he's saying about that as well, with the themes of One Piece and Elbaf specifically. And yeah, Garp's responsibility to the Marines. So you see everybody kind of making their decisions in the wake of God Valley in terms of like, how can I do what's right in the way that's most meaningful from their interpretations, right? And we can judge who's making the right choices, etc., etc. Ultimately, Roger probably takes the best path, but and that's why Roger's legacy is what it is today. But none of it would have happened without Rocks kind of exposing everybody. Anu Jaya, thanks to the 2. Does Dami reverse see Rocks count as well as anti-feats in this context? That's a good question. To be determined. That's a good question. it's going to be very difficult deciding the MVP here, because it's like, well, what does it mean in this context? So usually, for example, when we were deciding the Egghead MVP, it was a straight conflict with Strats on one side, world government bad guys on the other side. Who did the most on the Straw Hat side to advance their efforts, right? And like help them get away. This God Valley incident is difficult to rate because everybody came in with different goals. It's hard to determine what was a correct goal or incorrect goal. Like MVP means what? Like what does it mean? Does it mean for the general good guy faction? Like what does it mean? So it's going to be a lot to discuss here. Jared Boppler, thanks for the 2. God's Knights feel like fodder. Was that on purpose? My take is basically this. I would just remind people very quickly that I think this is a case with Oda maybe rushing through establishing future threats a little bit. I would remind everyone very quickly that just like 10, 15 chapters ago, right? Maybe 10 chapters ago? Maybe like 15 chapters ago, whatever. The Straw Hats were getting the Strats were getting absolutely demolished by the God's Knights. Just not that long ago, the God's Knights were being basically hyped up by the community as basically being clearly of the most broken group of subordinates, right? Because a lot, like, people didn't consider them admiral level or anything like that, but it was a group of supposedly like 8 or 9 characters, with just one of them being able to solo low diff pretty much all the Strats that aren't the monster trio, right? Which is a huge deal. That means essentially that a single God's Knight is worth more than 70% of a Yonko's core crew, right? That's a pretty big deal. A single God's Knight can solo the majority of the Straw Hats. And the Straw Hats just fucked up the Beast Pirates, right? You can say Luffy versus Kaido, whatever, but the general Straw Hat crew demolished the Beast Pirates. Like, the general Straw Hat crew was winning their 1v1s with the Beast Pirates pretty clearly, right? So this is not just your average Yonko crew. This is a core Yonko crew that's probably as strong as anyone except the red-haired pirates, right? And a single God's Knight could demolish them. Obviously, Sommers, same thing. Like, Chopper, Robin, Sol, no match for Sommers. Can't even do anything to him. And then killing him soloed all of Elbaf. All the giants got soloed by killing him, pretty much. Like, killing him just fucking demolished the entire nation, which is fucking insane. Killing him in like 10 seconds created an army that is objectively way stronger than Kaido's army, like his foot soldiers, his gifters and his numbers, etc., that he spent like a decade or something preparing, right? So there was a period that the God's Knights seemed really, really strong for the role that they were set to play. Obviously, there were never going to be like 8 or 9 admiral level characters, but I think most people at that time started saying like the God's Knights probably all like first mate level or something, right? First mate level, higher, whatever, right? So Oda gave us a glimpse of how strong they were, and they seemed strong in relation to our Straw Hats, right? In the flashback, the tricky thing is that Oda is now using the God's Knights as basically a hype tool for characters that he values even more, which are his past legends, right? That's why the God's Knights can just be like Whitebeard just casually cuts through that killing him. What's her name? Is it Maffy? I forget. Whitebeard just like casually pieces her up like it's nothing, like he doesn't even notice. Garling zero diffs Sommers. Sorry, not Garling. Rayleigh zero diff Sommers. Rocks low diffs Garling. Like across the board. And then the other God's Knights don't even get to show what they can do, right? So it's tricky because in that context, the God's Knights are like, Oda kind of went about this with the scaling, which is like, okay, first show the God's Knights in comparison to our modern day characters, the Strats and Elbaf, etc., Giants of Elbaf, yada yada. Then put them in the same ring as like the old legends and just show how crazy strong the old legends are in comparison to them. I think that's kind of how Oda just went about things. It's just all happens. It all happens in such a quick period of time, especially without giving us anything to give an idea of how strong Garling is, which is one thing that's very important before you start using him as a hype tool. So You know, it reminds so the turnaround of opinion on the Gods Knights. I think nothing happened in God Valley that was surprising, other than the Garling thing. Because like if you look at the past characters, yeah, Whitebeard should just walk through any Gods Knight, no question, right? This is not Jinbei or Brook or something. It's Whitebeard, right? So it's just a reminder that these characters are on another level. Prime Rayleigh is gonna zero diff Sommers, right? That's just gonna happen, right? Garling was the big surprise. The Garling incident, because Garling was the character, we kind of all assumed that, you know, all the Gods Knights, they'll be like this high level, not quite admirals or anything like that, but like at least high Yonko commander levels. That's, or Yonko first mate or something. That's what it seemed like from Elbaf so far. And that's why we all assumed that the commander, the leader of the Gods Knights, Garling and now Shamrock, should be way stronger. They should be, you know, Admiral, Yonko level, whatever. Maybe they are. Maybe they are, and Rox is just that strong. But we gotta wait till today, the modern day, to discover if that's actually the case. Dr. Farewell, thanks for the 5. Shanks will get a scar when he's with the Celestial Dragons. Really? Thought it's from Blackbeard. Whitebeard Pirates versus Holy Knights. We'll finally get Whitebeard versus Garling, referencing the post-Ennis lobby. I don't know if we're getting Whitebeard Pirates versus the Holy Knights. I don't know about that. Let's get the stream lights up to 50 real quick. Slicky MPA, thanks for being a Pirate King tier member for 37 months, man. Senor Morgan Freeman, what's good? Hope you've been well. Not sure if you're aware, but someone on TikTok is uploading all of your videos as if they were their own. Other than that, hope all is good. As long as it says it's like the Mr. Morge channel, then we should be good. Because we're paying somebody right now to repurpose lots of the channel's clips into TikTok videos. So, yeah, if anything, go support it on TikTok or whatever. That's been the case in the last, like, month or so. Months, maybe, I don't know. Time goes by fast. But thanks for bringing that up. I appreciate it. Empty Mind, thanks for being a Pirate King tier member for 4 months, man. Have you read JoJo's Part 9? If so, what do you think of it so far? Also, who do you think the pirate Shamrock was referring to? I honestly think it's Loki. I feel like the pirate might have been Shanks. I feel like it could have just been Shanks. Because I think that's the ultimate twist. Because initially we thought that it's Shanks talking to the Gorosei, so we're like trying to figure out which pirate it could be. The ultimate twist is the pirate that Shanks was talking about was Shanks, because that wasn't Shanks talking to the Gorosei. Have I read JoJo's Part 9? I've read the first 2 chapters, and that's it. I'm holding off. I'm just going to read JoJo's Part 9 when it's complete. Does anyone have an idea of how far off it might be from being complete, or how many chapters have come out so far? Because I've never read JoJo's weekly. I don't think I would find it an enjoyable weekly reading experience. Because JoJo is very, very slow in terms of plot progression. It focuses more on the immediate present fight, and then in between moves the plot forward a little bit. Or individual fight, stand battle. So I don't think I would enjoy it on a weekly experience. And I was also personally very disappointed with the way that Part 8 played out, to the point that I'm not super driven to like with Part 9, I'm in a state of like, okay, let's let Araki tell the story, and then after that, I might ask some people who finished it, like, hey, is it good? Is it worth spending time on? Because right now, there's other series that I want to read. I want to read Kingdom. I want to read Kagurabachi. Those are probably the 2 that I want to read right now. I'm trying to get through My Hero right now in the anime, but I'm genuinely struggling. I'm struggling. And I'm struggling to get through it. Hold on, is the door okay? Okay, hold on. Yeah, My Hero, like, I'm trying to watch it just for the entertainment of, like, oh, Final War, there'll be a lot of fights and stuff, but I'm also not enjoying... I'm just not enjoying it that much. Can you see out? Hold on. Maybe you mind closing that? Oh, okay, hold on. try doing the close and then release trick. Okay. Oh? Yeah. Nice. Thanks. Okay. Anyway, yeah, My Hero right now I'm just not enjoying. I mean, I'm trying to get through it, but I just don't know if it'll be good. And because I'm almost through season 7, people say season 8 is really well done. You never read Vagabond, lol? I read the first chapter. I'll get to Vagabond soon. That's probably because you skipped My Hero Academia's arcs. No, because I didn't skip much. Like, I've skipped bits and pieces here, but I generally know everything that's happening. It's not bad. I think it's not bad. That's the thing with My Hero, because it's not bad. It's really not bad. It just, everything feels a little bit simple in terms of, like, the character moments and everything. Like, it's so hard to explain why everything just feels like a little bit too simple. I also am not loving the fights. My Hero is always going to have an uphill battle for me because I don't enjoy quirks as an ability. I think actually, I don't remember what we rated them in terms of power system, but I actually really dislike quirks as an ability. Because I think the abilities that quirks give you are too simple. They're all very one-dimensional. There are some that are a little bit more to it, but it's just like some guy's quirk will be like yelling loud, or someone's quirk will be like they're all just very. It's just like one thing type abilities, and the abilities are usually kind of not that good. So it's hard for me to really even get engaged in the fights very often. I don't know. Okay. Anyway. Yeah, part 9, I think I'll wait for it to end, and then I'll catch up based on how it goes. JoJo's monthly, it'll finish in... What? No, how many chapters are out of JoJo's? Curse techniques clear? I mean, it's not even close in terms of a comparison. Hajime no Ippo or Haikyuu? Oh, I should go back to watching Haikyuu. I actually literally thought that the other day. I think my only thing is like Haikyuu, I want to see some fights. I mean, it's not a fight series, so it's just not the same, obviously, but I did really like the first season of Haikyuu that I watched. And I also randomly watched some YouTube video about like this actual Japanese volleyball player who's similar and got very popular. He's what's the role that Hinata plays? The striker, whatever, the spiker. His name's Nishida. So he's a Japanese volleyball player who is also like short, but has incredible vertical leap, and he's like a great spiker or whatever. And that got very popular. Only 20 chapters? Yeah, it'll take a long time. Okay, I'm just not even going to touch JoJo's Part 9 for now. I'm just going to pretend it doesn't exist. How old? Araki's very old, right? So I feel like this might be the final part. Araki, age. 65? Oh my god. Oda, age. 50. Okay, I thought Araki was like 55, but that got me worried. 65? Yeah, Yuji Nishida. Yeah. I watched a video on that, and I was like, oh shit, this is like Haikyuu. I imagine Japan will literally get better at volleyball in the near future, because I imagine there will be a young generation of people who want to play volleyball more. So I think that's going to be pretty common going forward. Crow Stray God, thanks to the 5. Is there any chance that Yamato/Ulti in page 1 leave Wano and join Cross Guild? Whether it's Cross Guild landing on Wano or Yamato running into them out at sea? I just don't think there's a lot of overlap there, especially because Cross Guild labels Luffy as their enemy. I just don't think there'd be overlap personally. Sheriff Laffy, thanks for being a Yonko tier member for 38 months, man. I always thought that Akainu could be from a non-world government island, and so he sees Marines as a necessity because his home was menaced by pirates. That's actually very, very likely. I agree. Because there's this. I always run into this when people are talking. I think if Oda did more of a job, and maybe he'll do it in the final saga, if Oda did more of a job showcasing, like, the consequences of islands that are ravaged by pirates, then how to explain this? A lot of the marine hate is obviously very warranted, right? But again, Oda's trying to paint a more complex picture, not a black and white picture, right? So the idea is that what we often see is islands that have been overrun by pirates, and the Marines can't do jack shit, and the Strats have to come in and save those islands, right? That's generally what we see, right? Or we see situations where the Marines or the world government are revealed to be really, really corrupt and bad and doing something really bad in some way, like Water 7 Enies Lobby, the O'Hara incident, whatever, right? So the two things that kind of stick out in readers' minds are basically like, well, the Marines don't really do anything because we don't actually see them saving people that often, right? And then what the Marines do, from what we've seen, is like lots of bad incidents. Like, again, Water 7 Enies Lobby, O'Hara, Marine Ford, yada, yada, right? So those are the things that are generally shown to us. Now, what Oda tells us a lot is that there are countless islands that are under Marine protection, and the Marines are necessary to drive back pirates, right? And we're told that islands that have Marines removed from them, those fall prey they get ravaged. Slavers come through and take over those islands. Like, there's lots of pirates that commit slavery and all of that stuff as well, right? But we don't get to see those. We're just told about that, right? So what's in our mental consciousness is basically that the Marines generally range from either useless or doing bad and corrupt stuff. And then you got the oddball outliers like Smoker or Kobe who are actually trying to do good things, right? That's what we've been made to feel over the course of the story. But that's because Oda's feeding us a very narrow section of the world. Because the main thing that readers don't seem to grasp is that if the Strats only were taken to islands where everything was safe and under Marine control, then we would have no fucking story, right? Oda's taking us specifically to the islands where the Marines were not able to overcome whatever threat the island has, right? So, like, obviously, Arlong at Kokoyashi Village. We even see a squadron of Marines try and go in to save the village, and the Arlong pirates fucking sink them, right? We're generally going to places where the Marines are unable to overcome the pirates, right? But that's selection bias, right? That bias, obviously, Oda's choosing those islands for us, for our journey, but it's basically giving us the repeated image of basically, well, pirates, like the good old Strats, they're where real justice comes from, etc. No, the Strats are the outlier. Pretty much all other pirates in the world are the ones causing the problems. And for the vast majority of islands, the Marines are keeping them safe as long as they're under world government protection, right? So that's why there's this sort of bias that appears. I think Akainu story would be a great way of depicting what does the average island look like when the Marines are removed from the equation and pirates are allowed to just run free. We see glimpses of that shit. We see quick glimpses, or we're told offhand that Big Mom's like the Big Mom pirates are like, oh yeah, this island, they didn't pay up their goods today, so we set the whole island on fire, right? That's Bobbin's introduction, right? We're told shit like that. We're told that Kaido's calamities go and destroy islands and like commit genocide and everything. We're told that, but we don't see it. Imagine how different it would hit if we got to see the entire mink race just genocided, erased, right? But they're not. They're saved by the Strats, so it kind of gets brushed off in our mind. But if that hadn't happened, an entire race just dies right there, right? So we're told these things. Marco tells us about this stuff, but we just don't see it as much. I think it'd be good to see it for once, because so far the only big genocidal instances in One Piece have been shown to us are O'Hara and God Valley, which are world government acts, right? It's told to us that pirates do this stuff way more and way more frequently, but we don't actually see it that often. That's why the world government's terrible moments are the ones that seem to be more at the forefront of our consciousness. But we have to remember that for the citizens of the world, that stuff's not at the forefront of their consciousness because in their reality, pirates do this stuff way more frequently, such that the world government's acts are almost drowned out. So that's where the nuance is. I hope that Oda's able to depict that with Akainu's backstory, because it's necessary to show us and not just tell us to get a more complete spectrum of the morally gray messaging that he's getting at, you know? Voila Musa, thanks a lot. God's Knights are like rich brats, strong compared to average fighters, but when shit gets serious, Thank God, Daddy Emu Infinite Regen Fund here is here. is here. I mean, it depends what standards you're rating them by, you know? Because, like, strong compared to the average fighter, like, they're still... You look at the God's Knights today, they still beat out most Yonko commanders, right? They would still be the elite of the elite in terms of Yonko commanders. It's just that that tier of admirals, Yonko, all of that stuff is very, very elite. I personally would not be surprised. Like, I personally think that Gorosei, probably Shamrock, I think that they're in the mix for that stuff, but they're not going to be as strong as, like, the strongest of the strong. Like, they're not going to be... At this point, right, I don't think stuff like Shanks, Mihawk, Kaido, Dragon, like that range, I don't think they're going to be there. I don't think they're touching that, right? I think like Green Bull or Garling, yeah, we're taking Garling, right? I think, well, I don't want to get too much into because then people will get upset if I'm not rating the admirals properly or whatever. I'll just say the characters I know that like Garling is not touching. He's not touching those tippy top Yonko plus type characters. Mad D Sun 300. How strong should the weakest Straw Hat be? End of story. So that's Usopp. I think that'll still be Usopp. End of story. Usopp and Nami are very difficult for me to rate in terms of their strength because they're not direct fighters. So with Usopp, you could always... I think Usopp, you always have a very wide range where you could rate him. Because at his... You could basically rate Usopp in terms of, like... I kind of rate him in terms of, like, who is the strongest... What is the strongest level of character that if he got to fight in his style, he could defeat? I think I kind of rate him like that. Okay? Like... Because you saw in Water 7, like, he just loses to random Frankie family thugs if he gets jumped, right? He just loses. He can lose to random Frankie family thugs. But if he has his prep and everything, or even without his prep, he's normally actually thrown into fights without prep. But if he's able to fight with his strategy and tactics to the fullest, he actually can fight like lots of superpowered characters in the Grand Line who were a lot stronger than the Frankie family, right? So Usopp's a hard... And the same applies to today, right? I think so, for example, you look at that random fishman today, that random fishman at the beginning of the post-time skip that Usopp defeated. That's an example that Usopp today, you can just throw him into a fight and he'll still be kind of effective even against like a superpowered character, right? But what's his ceiling? Because I imagine that, for example, Usopp's ceiling will be defeating Van Augur. But I don't know if that means that Usopp is as strong as Van Augur or if he's able to play that matchup out really well. Does that make sense? So I would say that Usopp at the end of the story should be at a point where he can beat a Toby Roppo type character. Keep in mind that for me, I view it as like, I think that every Yonko faction has... My broad tiers are like the tippy top guys, like... and people debate the top tier a lot, right? Because some people will argue that top tier is like Pirate King level, then Yonko level, then Admirals. Others will argue that Admirals and Yonko should be in the same tier, and then others will argue that like Admirals, Yonko, and Pirate King, there's no difference. They're all one tier, right? So let's say there's the top guys. And then I think there's like First Mate-esque characters, right? Characters kind of who could get to the next level or like are a bridge there. Then I think there's the rest of the Yonko commanders, right? So like your Josus, Queens, Crackers, those type of characters, right? Then I think you get to the Yonko officers, and that's where you got like Toby Roppo type characters. In Big Mom's crew, the equivalent was like Perospero, Oven, Daifuku, the clear elite officers, right? In Whitebeard's crew, it would be the division commanders that are not Marco, Josu, Vista, Ace, right? So I think that Usopp would not... I don't think End of Story Usopp is beating Yonko commanders, but I think he would be able to beat Yonko's elite officers who fall below that tier, right? So I could see End of Story Usopp defeating characters of like Sasaki, Black Maria type level. Now, if Oda really got tricky with it, maybe he could find ways for Usopp to beat a character that is quote-unquote Yonko top commander level, right? I just don't know how he would do that and still make it believable. But for all we know, that's how strong Van Augur is. And Usopp's dad is that level. So, you know. Voila, Musa! Thanks a lot. A creator wanted Luffy to think of saving the world like Dragon and Garp should be... A creator wanted Luffy to think of saving the world like Dragon, and Garp should do the same as Dragon. I was like, why? See if sameness to me. Oh, another YouTube creator? I don't want to speak on the opinions of other YouTube creators, but I do think it's good that Luffy is... Like, in a different story... Luffy would, like, you would have a protagonist like Dragon that's like, oh, this stuff is wrong. I'm going to start a revolution, or I'm going to join the Revolutionary Army, something like that. I'm going to become a revolutionary in order to stop it, right? And you've seen that in a million different stories, right? Star Wars, Hunger Games, whatever the fuck. Like, that tends to be how character storylines go. Luffy is the more unique figure in that I really don't know of another fictional character who quite has Luffy's journey of just like trying to do their own thing and just chasing freedom or whatever, but in the process basically saving so many people as a byproduct of his actions, right? I think that's what makes Luffy a very unique figure. It's just that when you place Luffy right next to a more traditional revolutionary type intentional hero like Dragon, that's when you can draw some... We haven't really had that in One Piece before. We've had plenty of characters who are like, you know, I want to stand up and revolt or whatever, right? But like, they generally are, they're just part of the Revolutionary Army or something like that. Dragon is the guy, he's the first guy that we've had in One Piece that is like actually taking the role of like, from the bottom up, just being like, there is no freedom fighting force, there are no revolutionaries or whatever. I'm going to become that for the world. I'm going to free the world, right? So when you introduce that into the story, and it contrasts with Luffy's more sort of by consequence method of slowly freeing the world, which is like he's just focused on his own stuff. He will save other people or deal with injustice if it happens to get in his way or is drawn to his attention, but he's not focused on it. If you put the more traditional hero mentality next to him, it can make Luffy look bad by comparison. Because we're more used to that traditional hero type force. And the One Piece world is so shitty that for a long time, readers have probably like internally just felt like, fuck the world government, fuck the Celestial Dragons. Like, we all just internally want those characters to face justice or be dealt with, right? So when we're finally seeing a character who is intentionally aiming to do it, and we know that this character story turns into basically building the army that can build that change, then you can't help but feel maybe a bit more emotionally moved by this character's efforts than our protagonist, even though we've been perfectly happy with our protagonist for so long. As our protagonist is basically, like, we loved Luffy for so long because even though Luffy didn't give a shit about any of this stuff, if he happened to run into the world government's bullshit, he would call it out and fight against it. Like, think him declaring war at Enies Lobby, or him punching that Celestial Dragon at Sabaody, right? So for the longest time, it's cool just seeing Luffy do the right thing because in the moment he just feels the right thing. And we're seeing this character just like push back and fight against the Celestial Dragons and the world government, etc. But it's not his main focus. So then when you put him next to some character that's actually treating it with the moral responsibility that it deserves, and he's like, I'm going to do everything I can to actually deal with that, whereas Luffy's still focusing on his own stuff, it does draw some negative comparisons to Luffy, despite the fact that we didn't actually have issues with Luffy before this, right? So I don't think that the existence of Dragon and us getting to understand more where he's coming from and appreciating that should take away from what a unique hero Luffy is. Oda's ultimately going to have Luffy be the one to free the world, so we should just keep that in mind. But it's kind of natural that, you know, it's easy to get behind Luffy when there isn't a traditional hero force in the story, because Luffy's doing all the heroic things, but he's just doing it kind of in a fun, casual way, right? But then once you include an actual traditional hero, then it can kind of feel like, well, maybe Luffy should be more like that guy. Like, why is we've enjoyed Luffy like saving everybody while he's fucking around, but what if he just stopped fucking around and actually got to it, you know? So that's a funny choice by Oda, but it's easy to get behind Dragon's shit because it's kind of like been a missing thing in the story so far. Anuj Agarwal, thanks for the 5. Whitebeard says the scars that I got from him ache when he sees Shanks' face. Can't be Shanks. It could still be Garling for killing his captain. Kind of a stretch. I think that killing his captain is a stretch. I personally think that it's the same thing that everybody assumed when that line was first around, which was people tended to assume that it was referring to Gold Roger, because Whitebeard and Roger used to have fights and everything like that. And now we've seen them on the opposite side of the battlefield, like, at least a couple times. It's implied that maybe it's happened more in other situations, right? Just as two, big dogs on the ocean just naturally running into one another. So I'm defaulting back to it being Whitebeard, assuming it's Roger or something. Because at this point, like, Garling, yeah. I will say that, like, I was correct. People were making fun of me earlier on in the God Valley flashback when I was saying I think that Rayleigh could take Garling. I think it could be like a draw or something, and people were like, no, Garling's got to be a Whitebeard opponent. Garling, like, a lot of people had Garling, if you go back in early rankings, a lot of people had Garling as, like, top, like, 4 on God Valley after, like, Rox, Roger, and Garp. Like, that was a common sentiment. I mean, I thought he was very strong as well. I'm not trying to say that I called that Garling wasn't strong, but I think now my take that Rayleigh could take Garling isn't that insane. I think Rayleigh could take Garling. It's Shamrock, man. Maybe it's Shamrock. I don't know. Starbright2551, thanks for the 10. My Hero is a story that benefits a lot from its slow and methodical build-up in its character moments, and you skipping that even a little here and there probably has an impact on what you can enjoy. I guess, maybe. It's just like, I don't know. Like, do I give out some spoilers here or whatever? I think there's a lot of factors for My Hero for me, which is that I just don't like a lot of the characters. Endeavor always gets me going, but there's very few characters that I actually, like, really strongly gravitate to. I think Endeavor there's so many good moments for Endeavor. I think I just saw Endeavor fight mild spoilers. I saw Endeavor fight All for One, and his effort prior to All for One popping his rewind capsule. Okay, I thought that was great. I really enjoyed that. I watched Todoroki versus Dabi, which is a scene that I really wanted to enjoy, and it's a fight that I wanted to enjoy. I thought it was well done. I just don't end up feeling that strongly from it. Maybe if I had watched more of it or whatever, but I actually have seen the Dabi. I watched a lot of the Dabi scenes already because I watched the previous fight where the previous little war. What would you call it? It's like where Shigaraki first emerges as a big threat that everybody tries to team up to fight, right? Like, I don't know if you guys remember that part of the story. Where everybody teams up to fight Shigaraki, that earlier battle. I watched that, and that had Dabi sections. So you're right, I might be missing a lot of in-between stuff, but I have watched probably a lot more of My Hero than you would think. I just don't think some moments, like, really... Like, the entire family, the Todoroki family or whatever, all showing up to try and, like, freeze Dabi or whatever. It was like, I get why I don't know. It's just, it feels like there's some stuff about My Hero that feels a little bit too sweet and, like, kiddish a little bit, if that makes sense. It, like, for me, like, plays the line between, like, it could be some more dramatic and serious storytelling, but it doesn't quite get there. That's where I feel right now, personally. Like, I also think that it's telling that in My Hero, death isn't necessary for storytelling. Let me just say that. But then when you're trying to have a war, like, you got to pick and choose the storylines that you're telling, right? So then if you're trying to have a war, I've noticed so far that, like, in this war, the big thing that is like, oh, this could be really bad, is, like, All for One stealing your quirk, right? So that's what people are really terrified of. It's like, oh, don't kill this character. It's like, no, please, All for One, don't take his quirk. And then that's kind of like death in the My Hero War, which is like a character's quirk being stolen, right? Which is obviously still really bad, and it basically removes the character as an effective part of the story, but it just feels a little bit less heavy. Like, does that make sense? again, death not necessary for storytelling, but if you're telling a war storyline, I do think that then it's like, well, is it just everybody slapping each other, or is it like actually like a heavy like climax to everything? So that's just where I'm at the moment with that. But I don't know. Lemillion the Goat, no cap. I loved Lemillion back when I was reading watching the Overhaul arc. I actually really loved the character then. And one of my favorite scenes from anime in general is Lemillion fighting without his quirk, right? So I'm not saying the take away quirk thing is bad, but I actually loved that scene where he's continuing to fight Overhaul without the quirk. I'm saying that some level of progression, so we're at a point where it's the final war and stuff, and the biggest thing that characters are afraid of is All For One going to take away your quirk or something like that. I like All For One as a villain. I think especially as he's like de-age. I thought his design was lame initially, but then as the de-aging stuff is happening, I think it's actually pretty cool. Anyway, I thought Lemillion was really cool back then, but then Lemillion literally like showing his ass in the final war. Like, this is literal. Him showing his ass in like a very dramatic, serious moment in the final war to like try and help. I thought was, I don't know, it kind of sums up some of my feelings about like the heaviness of the war that I'm trying to feel here. Anyway, continuing on. But I'm not in the final season yet, and I know the final season's when all the best stuff happens, and people are saying the final season's really good. So I'm finishing out season 7. The Omega Studio, thanks to the 5. Would you stream Kingdom read-throughs? It's my personal #1 manga, and after 800 chapters, it's getting better and better. 10 out of 10 peak. I wouldn't stream Kingdom read-throughs if I like it, because manga that I enjoy just reading on my own. Relaxed, in my bed, in my pajamas. If I'm really enjoying it, maybe I'll put out some reviews on it or something. 800 chapters, damn, that's crazy. Isaac Gavey, 7762, thanks for the 5. Imagine Zoro versus killing him if he has an ultimate ability that is able to draw out someone's nightmare, and he uses it on Zoro, and it's just Mihawk. It would be Quina. It'd be Quina, I think. And he uses it on Zoro. P.S. This ability can be used on people that are still awake. I don't know if we're going to get Zoro. I still think that we're going to get Usopp versus killing him, but that's an interesting idea. Let's get the stream likes up to 100 real quick. Let's get the stream likes up to 100. We will start the God Valley MVP stuff once we get the stream likes up to 100. Voila Musa, thanks. If Blackbeard is the final boss with Emu's power, maybe he can buff his bum-ass crew to be actual menaces. Right now, they're not scary at all. So somebody mentioned, because I think that Blackbeard will get the Seraphim on his side, and then somebody mentioned that he could Dami reverse the Seraphim. I think that would be really crazy to see. I think that would be really cool. His bum-ass crew, yeah, all of them Dami reversing could maybe that gets them up to par. But even then, Shiryu as a final opponent for Zoro, I just think would be really, really bad. Jav20, thanks for the 5. I see Iceberg alongside Garp and Harold trying to play a long ball game with the world government to do some good in the world and reduce the damage the world government could do. Iceberg, I don't know. Yeah, that could be interesting, but I don't know if Iceberg's got it like that necessarily. I think he's just trying to do what's good for Water 7. Yeah, I don't know about that. And Garp, I'm a little disappointed because Garp has never been a man with a plan. So I think, I wonder if he did, I don't know if he created Sword or anything like that. I do feel like it's now more likely that he was just focused on like, okay, well, the younger Marines, I'm just going to watch out for them. And that became, and trying to raise them to be strong, etc. might just have become his main goal. Mad D Sun 300, thanks for the 5. Who's that Marine Sengoku said left during God Valley who saw the corruption? Significant? I don't remember. I'm just going to assume it's not significant for the moment. BFJ9783, thanks for the 5. I think Blackbeard's character would be more interesting if he doesn't have Conqueror Saki. Do you agree? Yes, and I just think that that's more consistent with what we've seen of Conqueror Saki so far. I don't think Blackbeard has Conqueror Saki moments. Because people talk about, like, well, he's got big dreams and ambition and stuff. A lot of characters in One Piece have big dreams and ambition. Don Krieg fucking wanted to become Pirate King. That's not the main part of Conqueror. Like, For most Conqueror's Haki users, you can kind of point to moments where they appear to be Conqueror's Haki users. I don't think Blackbeard has any of those. I think he's got a lot of moments that make him look cowardly and scared and like overly careful and kind of spineless. I think he's got a lot of those, and I don't think Conqueror's Haki users are usually written like that. Again, I don't think Blackbeard has ever tried to... He has never taken a challenge where he's not already convinced that he's going to succeed. Oh, we got some spoilers coming out. My Hero haters never have any real critiques. I don't think that I have like really... I don't think I've been shitting on My Hero or anything like that here. I just think I'm not terribly engaged with it. And I'm... Oh my god. I think I'm not terribly engaged with it right now. And I'm trying. I think it has good moments. You know, like, for example... One thing that I enjoyed, and this is a really minor thing, but I thought was really cool, at least the way that they animated it, was, is his name Ida? Ida was low-key one of my favorite characters early on. I assume his name is Ida, the engine guy, right? I believe his name is Ida. I just will feel dumb if that's not actually his name, but I feel like his name is Ida. He was one of my favorite characters early on, but then just got kind of shoved to the side. I liked him taking Todoroki all the way across the continent or whatever to get to the big finale with Dabi. I thought that was a cool moment. Like, there's definitely moments in My Hero that I enjoy. I think that there's just nothing that feels elevated or anything like that. Like, everything feels, to me, like it's close to something really cool, really powerful or emotional or something like that, but then never really quite gets there. But you know what? Maybe it's just because I haven't watched enough of it, but I am telling you guys, like, every major arc, I have seen the majority of it. Like, I'll say that. Every major arc, there's no big missing gaps in my Hero knowledge. Like, I've seen the My Villains storyline. I saw the storyline where they all try and fight Shigaraki. I watched from the beginning of this season with Stars and Stripes and everything. I don't know. Like, I would say this, with this being the final war, because I remember a lot of people, when the final war of My Hero is happening, a lot of people were saying that it's really bad. What I'm getting so far is not bad. I think it's actually very solid. I just think that I'm not loving it, or there's not been anything that really, really gets me going. And then one thing I would add, that with My Hero, one thing that I've noticed is that I generally, the moments that are really strong, I think I've been able to connect with even if I haven't had that much context. So for example, the Overhaul arc, I skipped some of the lead up to the Overhaul arc, and I've just basically watched them do the entire raid. And Lemillion's final fight with Overhaul is still like one of my favorite moments in anime, period. Endeavor versus that Nomu, one of my favorite anime fights, period, right? I don't think I've gotten anything out of that so far from the final war. Anyway, continuing on. My Hero is good, it's just not great. Yeah, that's where it always felt a bit shallow. It's not shallow like shallow. I just don't think I don't think it does anything that deep or that profoundly moving, generally speaking. At least it hasn't here. I think it does have its moments which are really good. But that's me so far. People are saying the final season is really good, so we gotta wait and see. All right, let's get stream likes up to 100 real quick. Let me start setting up for the God Valley MVP rankings. Oh, what the hell? Yeah, I'm not trying to say negative things about My Hero because I've always enjoyed it to some degree. Again, I think another big thing is just the lack of characters that I really like. I usually need a character from each story, like any shonen, whatever that I'm reading. I need someone to latch onto as like a favorite character. Like, Like Demon Slayer early on, I became a Zenitsu fan. Black Clover early on, I was a Yami fan. Fire Force, I slowly became an Arthur fan. I don't know why I'm saying Arthur fan. Like a lot of these modern shonens, I like latch onto a character that I really enjoy, and then I come to enjoy the story, other characters, yada yada. My Hero, I think early on I liked Todoroki very early on, and then I just got so disappointed with the character. He was just like this angsty, annoying character for like a long time, and then there was no character I really liked. Voila Moose, thanks a lot. Which mangaka do you think can transition into directing movies? Reading Fujimoto one-shots made me think he could really pull it off. I mean, I think Fujimoto would be the only one that I would say, just because he's so well versed in filmmaking. Although I would say I think that Oda really is a huge movie fan himself. I think being a big fan of movies is not the same as like being a good director, but Fujimoto I think has the mind for it. All right. Let's see. All right, let me create this. All right. God Valley MVP. And other awards. All right, we're going to do MVP last. First, let me take a look at what were all of the awards that we did for Egghead. So I got a little refresher. Kunal Dashawal, thanks a lot. Seeing how fans are gassing Garling for killing rocks, Zoro being the executioner number 2 and killing Kaido would have worked, lol. I know Shanks fans lost it. I don't think I see anybody defending Garling killing rocks. I think that's... I don't think I've seen anybody doing that outside of as a joke. But maybe I'm missing some stuff. Who knows? Let's see. Let's see. Okay, so for Egghead, it looks like... Oh, shit. Oh my god. Got too many options here. Okay, it looks like what we did with Egghead, and similarly what we did with Wano, we can obviously add new things, but we can do okay. We had most improved. We had sixth. Oh, and you know what we did in the past? We did chat vote and Morge vote. Most improved, 6-man, best character arc, defensive player of the year. We had biggest bust. Oh, shit. We already know who's winning that. Rookie of the year. Coach of the year. Play of the year. People wanted best outfit. Okay, we have most assists. MVP. And then usually we actually have to remove Luffy from the MVP rankings, but we don't have to this time. Yeah, so we've got most improved, 6-man, best character arc, defensive player of the year, biggest bust, rookie of the year, coach of the year, play of the year, assist leader, MVP. I feel like we should have a scoring leader. But I wonder what scoring leader would mean. Would scoring leader mean like most people defeated? Or something like that? Scoring leader could be a good thing to add. Here, let me show you guys what I'm looking at. Yeah. So this is the setup that we got at the moment. Let's get stream likes up to 100 real quick. Kanal Dashawal and Bunfagum, 2 messages retracted. Sorry, I'm curious what they were. You know what? We'll just leave it. We'll just trust that they're retracted for the right reason. Mad DS, you said you wouldn't like Shanks with a zone. Thank you for the 10. You said you wouldn't like Shanks with the Zoan sword being stronger than Mihawk, but all characters in One Piece are stronger because of the fruit plus Fruits aren't earned. Example, Luffy, Whitebeard, Joy Boy. Yeah, I guess that's true. But at the same time, I feel like Oda, for the characters that... I think that with the character... You're right. But even with those characters like Luffy, Whitebeard, Joy Boy, those are all characters who are, I think even if you take away their fruit, they're probably still in contention for the strongest, right? So I think that's the crazy thing. Obviously with Shanks, that would be a similar case, but for whatever reason or the other, I think that I guess Shanks' weapon having a fruit, I guess that could be cool. You know what it is? I just realized. It's because it's the weapon having the fruit in that case. And so I know it's functionally it's a very similar thing to the user just having the fruit, right? But I guess that there's something about like, well, he's just got a special weapon that stands out a little bit more to me. Whereas with the fruits, because the fruits are things that people have eaten and are now like a part of them, I guess mentally it just feels a bit more like, well, they're like when I think of Kizaru, I just think of the light ability, right? I just mentally, organically associate it as like, that's him, that's his power, right? The sword, it's kind of like, well, that's something you can just give the sword to some, like anybody else could just take the sword, or the sword could be somebody else, or, you know, they could trade swords in duel or something. I think I just have, that's maybe a me thing. It's not the most logical thing. I guess it's more of a feeling thing in that, like, I associate, like when I think of Shamrock, for example, I don't think of him having a Cerberus power. I think, oh, he also has a sword that has a Cerberus power. It just feels a little bit different. I don't know. All right. Oh, Canal says, you did mine already? Don't worry. All right, good to know. All right. Here we go. God Valley MVP and other stuff. Okay, the rules. This one's going to be trickier to figure out the rules for, because there's no particular individual goal, right? Because God Valley had competing interests, just think of it as who did the most overall in whatever goals they set their mind to. I guess that makes sense. Should it be based on how they help others? I don't think so. Who did the most overall in whatever goals they set their mind to? Does that make sense? Is that something that people... No, I don't think that makes sense. Just think of it as overall impact. Yeah. Rather than furthering any specific goal. I guess that makes sense. We might have to workshop that definition as we go. Because God Valley competing interests, just think of it as overall impact rather than furthering any specific goal. It's the God Valley incident itself, not the entire flashback. Let's keep those as the rules. And we're going to do chat votes and I vote. All right, so that'll be two separate things. So, you know what? Let's make a new text box here. Chat pick and then Morge pick. All right? Yeah, there we go. I like that. Yeah, this is good. Good shit. Job 20s, thanks for the 5. Maybe Whitebeard learned later that Rox was being Dom-reversied, and among other reasons for not becoming Pirate King, felt guilty for not staying longer to help him. Whitebeard shouldn't have had to learn later, because it was right in front of his eyes, and it was very obvious what was happening. Like, not obvious that, oh, Emu's turning him into a demon, but obvious that Rox is not in his right state, and it's something based on what Emu just did. And he's clearly transformed into something different. Felt guilty for not staying longer to help him. I don't know if that's going to be a key part of Whitebeard's story. I don't know if we're going to fill in more gaps for him or anything like that. I think Whitebeard might have just been like, okay, well, that's just the way things went down. We leave it there. I should hope that, you know what? Maybe if Roger and Whitebeard had their conversations, right? They've had a few conversations, both during the Odin flashback and then obviously that final flashback Roger had with Whitebeard at the end of his life. You would think that Roger might have told him at some point what went down there. All right. Let's get into it. All right. Let's get the stream likes up to 80. We get it up to 80 and we can get rolling. Mad D Sun. I think of Shanks like Thor. Strong with or without hammer. I guess. Yeah, let's wait and see. Maybe our opinions change if we find out Shanks does have a special sword or something. I guess I view the sword as more, like, weapons as more interchangeable, right? Whereas I view, like, a fruit that's now a part of you till death do you part, basically. Like, that is now, you are the embodiment of that fruit. But it, you know, it's just different perspectives. All right. Draft 20 says, it's Justin Holland, it's me. I did actually know that, by the way, just based on the Patreon and YouTube Pirate King submissions. And I could, basically, I think you told me that at some point or something, but I just didn't want to, I didn't know if you wanted me to just call you Justin when you're saying that, or if you're maintaining greater anonymity or something like that. But I did realize from those submissions, because your questions are often build on one another. Mad D Sun, thanks for the 5. I think of Shanks. Oh no, we covered that. All these awards are going to go to triple single merchants. Nah, come on, man. You know what? I'm not. Okay, I'm sure everybody's got to be really happy that the NBA sucks right now because I'm not talking about it during streams. I also get almost no NBA questions on streams nowadays, so I can only imagine that other people are not as excited about the NBA right now. It's a sad world. It's just the way it is. You know what? Let's make this red. All right, let's get into it. Most improved. I think in the running for most improved is, we've got, let's see, Kaido, Dragon, from a strength perspective, you could argue Rocks with Dami Reversi, but I don't think that that's exactly that. I think Kaido and Dragon are in there. I guess Kuma. Is your lack of excitement due to OKC? Yes, very much so. I also think that the East-West balance is really, really bad right now. I think this is the worst that it's ever been. It's genuine. Like, I think that that's not good for the game if the East and West are this imbalanced. Because for years, the East was bad, but it still had LeBron. So it was kind of just like, it was almost cool that the East was bad because it was just like, LeBron just exists as this force of nature that's guaranteed to basically be in the finals. So then the storyline becomes like LeBron versus who? Like LeBron versus the Spurs, LeBron versus the Warriors for years. And that kind of carries a narrative for a while, right? So I think that that's kind of cool to have stability with like the player that you want to see in the finals every time against like whoever's coming up from the West. And I wasn't a LeBron fan, by the way, until 2018. So, but even then I respected that was the setup. It felt like a final boss setup. It gave the NBA a sort of flow, etc. 2019, the East was actually very strong. I think that's the most competitive the East has been that I can think of. I thought 2019, the East was really cool. And then after that, it was like, East was bad, but then you had the Celtics and then kind of the Heat and the Sixers or whatever. But now it's hit a point where there's nothing in the East, right? There's nothing. And I'm just like, this feels stupid. We're just watching the the West teams compete against one another, and there's going to be fucking nothing in the actual finals. Like, you want to feel like there's... Like, I'm not a huge person like, oh, every team needs to be competitive, but give me at least one good team in the East or whatever. Anyway. At least the Lakers are doing well. Yeah, but I don't feel like... I just don't believe right now that any team can beat the Thunder. So I'm not interested in, like, the Lakers or the Nuggets or something doing really well, getting to the conference finals, losing to the Thunder. It's just not exciting to me. I'll believe it once I see the Thunder start losing. Anyway. Meek, thanks for the 5. If LeBron was represented as a One Piece character, who would he be? Emu, Rocks, Roger, or Joy Boy? I'd say he'd be like Whitebeard. Like an extremely long tenure. Retain the title of, like, best in the... Like, even at a point where he's no longer the best, right? He still kind of got that respect for a long period of time. You know, like, the whole... Because Whitebeard's tenure is kind of crazy, right? It really started with the whole Rocks era. And in the Rocks era, he was actually still a pivotal figure. He was a big deal back then, right? Then it transitions over to the next era where it's like him, Roger, Shiki, some of the Yonko popping up and everything. But Whitebeard was kind of like the other big name alongside Roger in that era. And, you know, he's right there with him, you know? And then Roger dies, and then Whitebeard gets another 20 years where he's now considered basically the top dog for a crazy long period of time. I think Whitebeard represents LeBron. The geriatric needs to retire so Luka can get some actual help. Hey, how do you think LeBron felt at Marine Ford? Luka's ace, and LeBron's there as like Whitebeard. Anyway. LeBron wouldn't have conquered Saki because he'd run another Pirates crew to team up and form a super crew. Hey, I mean, he was part of the Rocks Pirates for a long time. I can't say I respect everything that LeBron's done career-wise, but it's tricky. Because it's like, there's a lot of context to a lot of things. I don't know. Anyway. I think the thing that should make LeBron happy is what Kevin Durant did going to the Warriors. Because, like, yeah, it robbed LeBron of some rings, but it also makes LeBron's past decisions look less egregious. Because essentially what LeBron did when he went to Miami, from my understanding of NBA history, it was unprecedented. And it was like, holy shit, this is not right. You can't do this, etc. But then other people started also doing it, right? Like, nowadays, it's very, very common for teams for players to basically be like, oh, let's go team up over here. Like, Paul George and Kawhi are like, let's go fucking team up in the Clippers, right? Like, it's very common, right? Players would just be like, yeah, we'll both go over here. Kevin Durant and Kyrie, right? Like, it's universal now. Players convincing other players, we go team up, etc., right? What Kevin Durant did was basically like, he pushed the envelope too far. So now people basically like, it moved the Overton window essentially for the NBA. So it kind of set a hard limit, which is like, okay, what Kevin Durant did, that's too far. Nobody's going to do that. But now what LeBron did, we're just kind of going to normalize that. And so now everyone's doing it. So now it's not looked at as bad what LeBron did. He was just the first. Anyway, Kuma's the MVP. I don't know about that. He doesn't have my vote. I'll just say that. Let's get the stream likes up to 100 real quick. Maybe he does. I haven't gotten there yet. All right, most improved. We've either got Kaido or Dragon or I guess Kuma, right? Because Kuma got his fruit. I kind of want to disqualify Kuma from this. I almost want to disqualify Kuma. I feel like it's not fun having Kuma in this ranking. Because I just don't feel like he's not part of the story that we just read. I guess he is. Obviously he is. But I was more focused on like Kuma's flashback already happened, you know? Obviously he's a big part of the God Valley incident, but they're doing their own thing, you know? I don't know. I kind of want to focus it on the current flashback, if that makes sense. He could be most of these. He'd be in contention for he would be in. I'm not saying he'd win, but he'd be in contention for best character arc. I think he easily wins Defensive Player of the Year. He's in contention for Rookie of the Year. Probably in contention for Play of the Year. He probably just in contention for most assists. In contention for MVP. He's just in too many. Only one award per person? Nah, I don't like that. Big Mom resurrected her character in the flashback, lol. Oh, no, it's not most improved in terms of character. It's not most improved in terms of character. Most improved in terms of, like, I mean, I guess you could say in terms of character, but, like, Big Mom didn't grow or anything. Like, it's not most improved in terms of our perception of their character. Like, Big Mom didn't grow in this flashback, but Dragon grew in this flashback, right? So, well, for both characters, our perception of them changed. For Big Mom, it was just our perception, whereas for Dragon, it was perception and in terms of his actual character, he grew. Play of the Year is Rayleigh? Maybe Rayleigh is the Play of the Year. Let's keep it simple. Let's start with most improved. So, I would say, in terms of most improved, you got Kaido, Kuma, Dragon. Dragon, I think, has the most improvement in terms of, like, holistic, right? I think Dragon, this is where his strength of will first came out. We didn't get any crazy conqueror, Saki Bloom or anything, but this was basically the birth, like, this was basically overnight go from, like, rookie, like, random brainwashed Marine rookie to, I'm gonna fucking change the world, right? So I think he had a huge step forward in terms of strength of will and character, right? But not in terms of strength. Kuma, I think he also had a change in that he had a realization of, like, what he could be in terms of a savior to people. And he also got a really broken fruit. Kaido just got a really broken fruit. Yeah. Who do we want? I think these are the candidates. If we were to look at past videos, right? So let's take a look. Let's take a look at what we did for Egghead, just for past precedent. Morge Egghead MVP, and we'll take a look at Wano MVP. We'll take a look at two things. All right, this will help us. This will help us understand. This is what the voting involves. Okay. The hell? Okay. You know what? We'll pull up a Morge Unleashed video to figure this one out. Okay. Here we go. All right. So for Egghead's MVPs, this is what it looked like in the past. For Egghead's MVPs, so for Egghead most improved, we said Kobe. That makes sense. We said Kobe. Okay, that's good. That makes sense. For most improved for Wano, we said probably, I'm guessing Momonosuke, right? Yeah, we said Momonosuke. So I guess those ones are, I guess in both we kind of favored, both voting competitions, we kind of favored characters who feel very different, like they've evolved a lot between the beginning and the end, right? And that can mean multiple things, in different ways, right? I think it's really between Kuma and Dragon here. Again, I have half a mind to remove Kuma from this discussion. I want to focus, because I want to focus on the story that we just got. All right, looks like chat is going dragon. I might go dragon as well. Yeah, I think I'll go dragon as well. I think it could be Kuma though. But I feel like dragon just had a fundamental change. Like I think he's a totally different character at the end than before. Whereas Kuma, I feel like he's the same person. He's just got a bit more confidence. All right, sixth man. Sixth man. I feel like that's Rayleigh. I feel like that's Rayleigh, personally. Like, not... Is he really in the fray? I don't think so. Right? He's not even included in the main battle or whatever. But he comes off the bench, defeats Sommers, saves Shaki, which was like their main goal. I think Rayleigh's a great sixth man. I think Rayleigh's a great sixth man. I think outside of Rayleigh... What do you need? Okay? Okay. I'll let him out if needed. I think outside of Rayleigh, I would say... Give him a little bit longer, then we'll do that. Dragon doesn't deserve MVP? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, maybe. I don't think Whitebeard's a sixth man. I think he's too in the fray to be a sixth man. Yeah, do we want Kuma or not? Do we want Kuma or is it too easy? Polo Graham is actually not a bad sixth man. Okay, hold on. Do we want to include Kuma, Eva, Ginny? Alright, so looks like we gotta keep him. Not really an ostrich says yes, but only what they did in the flashback. I don't know. I think if we're including him, we just include him. I mean, we could do that. We could do that. Do you want to do that? Okay, I'll do one more poll for that. Okay. Do we include Kuma, Eva, Ginny? No, keep it to this flashback. Yes, but only what they did this flashback. Yes, but entire incident included. Let's do that. This is pretty tight. Okay, I'm going to do one more poll. I'm just going to do the last two options. All right, so everybody vote for this one. Everybody vote for this one. This is pretty controversial. Okay. Kuma, Ginny, Ivankov included. Yes, but only what they did this flashback. Yes. Okay, well, hold on. Only include what they did. This flashback. Include everything they did. Last poll, last poll. Get your votes in, get your votes in. This one really determines a lot. All right. All right, we'll just include everything they did. We'll just include them. All right, they're allowed. They're allowed. All right. Kuma's going to fuck this whole vote up. All right. Because you guys got to remember, lots of times with these, we have to exclude Luffy because Luffy's like the protagonist of the whole thing. I feel like it's a little unfair because Kuma, like the God Valley incident, what we got here was a mix between so many characters, but we already got to see the story once through Kuma, with Kuma basically being the protagonist, right? So it's a little bit... That's why I've got issues with it. Obviously, Rox, Roger, Garp were all protagonists here in their own right, but it's more of an even mix, whereas Kuma got his own flashback dedicated to him here, so it's tricky. All right, anyway. Sixth man. Are we saying sixth man is... I feel like it's Rayleigh. I feel like Rayleigh is the sixth man here. Like, sixth man, what that means is basically like, you're not one of the main guys, right? You're not one of the main guys, but you came in really clutch. I think that's Rayleigh to me. Who do we got for sixth man? What's your guys' picks? I think Dragon can compete with Kuma. I don't know how much Dragon had an impact here. Should have been Bagard LMAO, but bro vanished. Yeah. Bagard was set up to be the perfect sixth man. Kuma again? No, Kuma can't. You can't be sixth man and MVP. That's not what sixth man means. Like, LeBron can't win sixth man. I mean, maybe this year he could. But Steph Curry can't win sixth man, you know? I think this is where knowing sports a little bit comes into play. Who are the non-sixth man-ish candidates? Okay, so here's who's on the table, right? Characters who are on the table are characters like... basically characters that don't get involved in the main scuffle, right? Characters like Kaido, Big Mom, stuff. Or no, I think Kaido you could include in that category, okay? But Roger, Rox, Whitebeard, Garp, the characters in the thick of it, Garling, they can't be involved, okay? But you can have characters that are doing stuff a little bit more on the side, right? The secondary storyline stuff, to some degree. Or they come in with... I think Kaido could qualify as sixth man. Kaido could qualify as sixth man because he really didn't belong there, but he showed up and helped out. His help just wasn't effective. Rayleigh, I think, is ideal sixth-man candidate here. I think Maffey would count. Kuma was MVP in God Valley 1, but now he's a sixth man in God Valley 2. Yeah, but you guys voted to combine both of those, so, you know. Captain John. Yeah, Captain John could be a sixth man. Yeah, not enough characters did anything to even qualify for the sixth man of the year award. Yeah, because it's really just 5 chapters, right? 6 chapters. Could be Rayleigh, could be Shiki. I just don't... Gonzui for sixth man, squared up to Laban and booger diffed Captain Bum. Didn't he lose to Gaban, though? Here we can put the... Why not Gaban? Because Gaban didn't do anything, and we're putting Gaban at the same tier of significance as Rayleigh. Gaban was putting in work. Okay, we can put in Gaban. All right, here. Sixth man. I'll put in Rayleigh, Gaban. I'll put in Shiki and Gonzui. Rayleigh, not a starter, but came in clutch twice. Yeah, I think the fact that they had Rayleigh on the bench in this scenario is kind of crazy. I do wish that Oda had involved Rayleigh and Gaban in that Emu battle, because it's just so bizarre. Because in the modern day story, Oda's focusing on Gaban, and he's telling us about like how Roger had these two great wings in the past and stuff. And it's like, show us the wings, show us what they can do. Rayleigh, and then oops, my pick is also Rayleigh. Best character arc. I feel like this one's relatively simple, right? Best character arc. We've only got a few options. I feel like we've got obviously Dragon. I would say Rocks didn't really have a character arc here. Is the thing. Rocks didn't really have a character arc. I could argue Garp maybe had a character arc. Rox's character changed over the course of his flashback, but not within the God Valley incident itself. No, Rox didn't. What's his character arc at God Valley? He doesn't have a God Valley character arc. It's only the incident. It's not the entire flashback. It's the God Valley incident itself, not the entire flashback. Rox's character arc is phenomenal, but it had already taken place prior to the God. Like, the character arc was him choosing to throw everything away and go to God Valley for the sake of the ones he loved. 1 second. Yeah, go. Good dog. So what happens with the dogs is basically, so this room is the room from which I stream in, okay? And I usually like to just shut the door when I'm streaming, but sometimes it'll be open, keep it open or whatever. So like lots of times if the door is open and then the dogs come in, then they want to stay in and they want to be here. And then she's trying to get them out, but they don't want to come out, so like they just stay here with me. But then after she shuts the door again, then there's usually after a few minutes, then the dogs feel like, oh, well, we want to go back out because we don't want to just be stuck in this room. They're like, okay, we want to go back out. We want to be with mama. So then it's just like, okay, well, then these dumb dogs, like, they just have no forward thinking. They don't understand that once, that if they come in here, then the door is going to be shut. And then after that, they're not going to be able to go out again, even though that's really where they want to be. So it's just the same little song and dance pretty frequently. Anyway. All right, so we got Dragon winning. Yeah, I think that's pretty safe. All right, defensive player of the year. Defensive player of the year. I think here we easily throw in Kuma, right? I think we can throw in Kuma. I think that Whitebeard has an argument as well. He took out Maffy. I think he helped clear the way to get to Shaki. I think he kind of blocked rocks that one time. Morge analyzing dogs like he does anime is kind of hilarious. Garling best character arc, starts the arc killing his baby mama, is punished for this by losing Shaki. Then he learns his lesson and never lets an opportunity ever go again. So he swiftly kills rocks. That's a good point. I think Kuma's got to win it, right? I'm just throwing out other options just to throw him out. Defensive player should go to Scott because he didn't fight anyone and he was responsible for getting the Roger Pirate's treasure and help Rayleigh and Shaki get away. Yeah, that's a good point. That is actually a good point. I think Gaban's in there. I guess Rayleigh's in there for helping Shaki. Does Rox have an argument for defensive player of the year? Because he did have to hold off the entire Davy clan and the God's Knights by himself for a long time, which is pretty impressive. Roger and Garp defended everybody from Dami versus Rox. Yeah, if you want to argue defense like that, Emu tanked everybody's strongest attack. Yeah, but he didn't defend anybody while doing so. I guess that is defense. Garp defended the entire Marine side. I feel like that should give him negative points, honestly. In any game, having over 500 assists is crazy. Kuma clears. But then we've already got the most assists award. Not mad at Roger and Garp splitting this one? Okay. Okay, hold on. Okay, here, let's give some options. Defensive player of the year. Right, Kuma obviously in there. You could argue Roger and Garp. I think you could argue Roger / Garp. They would split it, probably. Roger and Garp would split that. I think you could argue Whitebeard. I think you could argue, some people mentioned Gaban because he had to protect Shaki the entire time, right? So let's line those up. Dragon defended Baby Shanks. Yeah, it was just one baby, and he didn't do that super well. He did it kind of well. Saving characters isn't assists, it's straight up doing something. I agree. That's true. It's a good point. Yeah, it's hard to beat Kuma. It's actually very hard to beat Kuma for this. This is undeniable. It's literally, he defended he defended everybody that needed to be defended. Biggest bust. We're just going to move on. I think the only one to give him a run for his money might be Bagard, but I think let's be honest here. All right, Rookie of the Year. This is another Dragon Kuma situation, right? Another Dragon Kuma little bout. All right, Rookie of the Year. Dragon or Kuma? This should be close, because it doesn't really make sense to vote Dragon as Rookie of the Year, but then Kuma as MVP. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Because this is the same as asking MVP, basically. It's just taking the MVP vote and narrowing it down to breakout characters. Like, characters who are having their breakout moment here. So keep this in mind. Like, in case I'm worried that people don't understand. If you're voting Dragon over Kuma for Rookie of the Year, then you also have to vote Dragon over Kuma for MVP. Because they're both rookies, and it's asking who was the best rookie, right? So Dragon can't be a better rookie than Kuma, but Kuma's better overall at God Valley. That's not how it works. Like, put it this way, a player can't come out and win MVP in their first year and not win Rookie of the Year. That doesn't make sense. That's not a real thing. Okay, I'm just going to say this. Understand, if Dragon wins this, then Kuma is disqualified from winning MVP, because I'm just not going to have that nonsense on this. That's the most illogically stupid misunderstanding of these rankings for that to take place. Okay, Kuma is automatically disqualified. All right? You got to understand that Rookie of the Year is basically asking who was the MVP out of the rookies. All right? That's what Rookie of the Year means. Who was the MVP out of the rookies? I'm going to run this poll again because I don't think people get it. This is not a thing where like, oh, let's give Dragon this consolation prize and give Kuma MVP overall, okay? It's basically like saying, let's say this year Cooper Flag somehow won MVP, Cooper Flag is the rookie. He's a rookie in the NBA. Okay, let's say he somehow won MVP. He would also then, almost by default, win Rookie of the Year because he's the best rookie. Okay? Does that make sense? There's no scenario where you can win MVP, but then as a rookie, but then not win Rookie of the Year. That doesn't make any sense. Yeah, but I want to give something to Dragon without giving him the MVP. So don't vote like that. Vote as Dragon's already won a couple things, right? So vote as though who is actually more valuable, right? Who actually did more? Who was the bigger star, Kuma or Dragon, right? I'm okay with personally giving Dragon Rookie of the Year, but that's because I'm not on the train that Kuma is necessarily MVP. Okay? So my thinking is sound. Because I think I rate Dragon higher than Kuma for Rookie of the Year, and I don't really put Kuma, I don't think I'm going to have him as my MVP. Okay? So there's no contradiction there. There is a contradiction if you vote for Dragon over Kuma as Rookie of the Year, but then you vote Kuma as MVP. That's a contradiction, okay? So let's do this one more time, all right? Here, I can include Kaido, yeah. I don't think that Kaido's really a rookie at this point, because No, I don't consider Kaido a rookie at this point. He's older than Luffy and has been a pirate longer than Luffy. He's not a rookie. That's fucking stupid. Is Luffy still a rookie? Like, at what point are they... Like, would Luffy win a Rookie of the Year award? Kaido's in his second year? I don't think so. I think he's been a pirate for some time. Kaido's the rookie of the Rocks Pirates, though. Yeah, but I don't know. Like, Dragon's actually a rookie, but that's just by relative age, right? That doesn't mean he's a rookie overall. That's just because the Rocks Pirates are all older characters who have been doing pirating longer than him in relation, but that doesn't mean Kaido's actually a rookie. Dragon saves Kuma, so he leeches all of Kuma's feats. All right, that makes more sense. We're saying Kuma is Rookie of the Year. Coach of the Year. Everyone was kind of mean to each other at God Valley, right? So is it just Ivankov? Is Ivankov the best coach there? We got Ivankov. Who else did some coaching? I don't think there was any other coaching, right? Rocks? Oh, Rocks coached... Rocks coached Kaido a little bit. Sengoku coach of the bums. Whitebeard. Did Garp do any coaching? Who did Garp coach? Roger for the hockey mask thing? Garp teach Roger about hockey? I don't think Garp... I thought they were just sharing thoughts. I don't think that either one of them really appeared more knowledgeable than the other. Garp and Roger to each other? If I were to read that scene again, it seemed to me more like Roger, I think, had the better... Garp taught Roger about... Okay, let's re-examine this. I don't think either of them really felt like they were the coach of the other. I feel like they both just bounced ideas. Or not bounced ideas, but like... I feel like it was pretty equal in terms of their contribution to that discussion. But let's see. Okay. So let's look at this coaching situation. Either way, I think I'm going to give it to Ivankov, but let's see. Obviously, you guys can pick who you guys think makes more sense. Okay. So it starts here. It all comes down to mass, doesn't it, Garp? Mass, what do you mean? So to me, I would think that Roger's kind of coaching a little bit. Color farming, blah, blah, blah. He's explaining this. There's no... So they cancel out. So exactly my point. There's no damage unless we surpass that. To me, it sounds like Roger's the one kind of leading the discussion. If it all comes, if it's all down to who wears out first, we'll lose. There's no way to keep up with a monster like that thing. So you want to hit him with a critical mass of Supreme King Haki. This is Roger coaching, and Garp asking questions and clarifying. How is this even... Where does Garp coach? I don't even think... Now rereading, I don't think it's even a 50-50 split. I think it's a clear Roger coaching. Where's the argument that Garp coached him? I feel like it's Ivankov. I don't think Emu did coaching. I'm not counting Dami Reversi as coaching. We could do Ivankov, Roger, and Rox. Yeah, let's do Ivankov, Roger, and Rox. What did Ivankov do for coaching? Also, why wouldn't Emu be in the discussion? Also, more people voted for Dragon in the first poll, so why is Kuma the rookie? Ivankov coached Kuma a lot pretty much through the entire... If you go back and read the flashback from Kuma's perspective, Ivankov basically coached Kuma a lot through Kuma's journey there. Kuma was like ready... Kuma was like basically at rock bottom when Ivankov first met him. And then Ivankov pretty much explained the plan to Kuma and then guided Kuma to what to do with the devil fruits and all of that stuff. So I think Ivankov was basically like the voice guiding Kuma, which is what we're looking for with coaching. Emu I don't consider a coach because I don't count Dami reversing and then taking control of the character as coaching, personally. More people voted for Dragon in the first poll, so why is Kuma the rookie? Because people voted for Dragon in the first poll, like I kind of clarified, and it turned out to be what I suspected, which is people voted for Dragon in the first poll because a lot of people are planning on voting for Kuma for MVP. So they're giving Dragon Rookie of the Year as a sort of consolation thing. But I just pointed out why that's, one, logically inconsistent, and why that then disqualifies Kuma for MVP. Because Rookie of the Year means who was the MVP among the rookies, right? So it's taking the MVP conversation and then just narrowing the number of candidates. It's not changing any definitions, right? So it's contradictory to have Kuma be the MVP of all characters combined, but then somehow not be the MVP when you're narrowing it down to a smaller subset of candidates, when you're going by the same criteria. Ivankov. Looks like Ivankov's the winner for Coach of the Year. All right. Play of the Year. Play of the Year, it depends. Because I feel like there's two potential Play of the Year candidates. I think you've got Rayleigh with Shaki. I think you got Kuma saving... Eris and Teach. And then if you want to split it, if we're doing ties, then you got Roger and Garp's final move on Rocks. I think that's if you want to do ties. If ties are allowed, then that wins. If it's individual moments, then I think it's either Rayleigh or Kuma. Unless there's another play I'm forgetting. Dami Reversi on Rocks easily? Oh, shit. That might be the Play of the Year. That's like a pretty crazy play, if we count that. Yeah, that might be it. Yeah, that's pretty big. That was probably the most pivotal play. And we're counting everybody. What if we just do protagonists? Nah, that's boring. For this one. Dragon putting Shanks in the chest. I don't think Dragon even did that. Saving Shaki and Garp/Roger beating Rocks are my nominees. Saving the slaves is the game, not a play. Yeah, if we're counting Emu, I think Emu gets it, right? Okay, here, let's do some polls. I don't know if we want to... We can just not include Emu if he's too strong for the game. Because normally when we do these, we actually don't include villains. It's just in this storyline, heroes and villains a lot are crossed over. But Emu is unequivocally bad. But, you know, if we can have Garling win Biggest Bust, then why not have Emu win that? Dragon shooting Celestial Dragon, I don't think that's a play of the year, personally. Because, like, they all attacked Emu. You know? They all attacked Emu, they all attacked God's Knights. Those are Celestial Dragons as well. Okay, play of the year. Rayleigh save... I'll just go in chronological order. Rayleigh save Shaki. I don't think Kuma saving Eris and Teach is play of the year. I don't think that falls in there. I don't think it's wide enough impact to the God Valley incident in general. Emu, Dami, Versi, Rocks, Roger/Garp, final team attack. Oh, let's get the streamlights up to 100 because we're almost there. Malik, thanks for the 5. Dami Reversi is the tush push of One Piece. So I've got a question. The Eagles just won the Super Bowl last year, right? And so I know that with football, this has become like a whole thing, which is the tush push. And that's like what the Eagles really used. And to me, it seems like a really annoying and frustrating strategy and kind of a cheesy strategy. But as far as I know, are football fans that upset about it? Or is everybody just like, oh, yeah, I guess it's okay, and we all just are rolling with that? Like, were football fans upset about it? Are they upset that the Eagles won? Hold on. It's a thing with how hard it is to officiate with false starts and the sort. If it was so easy, everyone would do it. I generally don't like those arguments in sports because that applies to some things, right? Like, you know, when Steph started hitting like a million threes, it's like, well, that's not broken because if it was so easy, everyone would do it or whatever. But there are some things that I think people recognize as like not necessarily, yeah, like one team has certain advantages that allow them to do a strategy that on paper seems cheesy. But at the same time, it's like, well, is this something that we consider good for the game? And is this what we want the game to be? Or does it feel like something that kind of abuses certain facets of the game? So, for example, like, I can only speak from the NBA perspective, but like the Oklahoma City Thunder, they basically realized that they could, if they just played really, really constant, dirty defense, right, throughout the regular season and playoffs, they just do stuff so much that the refs aren't going to call everything. And they basically abuse that facet of the game. And two things can be true, which is that on the one hand, that's not actually easy because you have to get your team really into like a coaching rhythm to be very committed to always playing this like very foul heavy play style, right? You have to have everybody lockstep in the mentality of doing that, right? So it's not like any team can just flip a switch and turn it on and it's like, okay, we're all just going to start fouling like the Thunder all the time or whatever and see how much we can get away with, right? There is a strategy behind it, right? So that is true. But at the same time, is the basic tactic something that we want in the game, or is it just something that we kind of view as like a messier or uglier part of the game that a team has basically realized how to abuse and that's not necessarily what we want the game to look like. That's how I view it with the Thunder. So my question is the tush push viewed similarly in football or no? Okay, looks like Dami Reversi Rocks is taking it, which makes sense. It's a shame because I think that was Roger and Garp's chance to win something here. Okay, most assists. This is tricky because we don't like people viewed it as Kuma saving people isn't assists, and I view that as fair because either we're gonna have him as defensive player or like what are we categorizing his actions as, right? So we already said it's defensive plays, so assists becomes a different category, right? So I think actually Roger is back in contention here. I think Roger might be back in contention here because he assists early on with like helping Rayleigh get to Shaki. He even holds off Whitebeard during that, right? Then later on he assists Rocks in the battle against Emu. And then finally he and Garp are assisting each other in terms of fighting Rocks. So I think there's an argument there. Does Garp have that argument as well? I guess it's implied that Garp is assisting the Marines. I think with Roger we see him more clearly, like what he's doing to help Rayleigh save Shaki. Is Whitebeard in this discussion? He accidentally assists Dragon. He assists Rocks quite a bit. I don't know. I don't know if Whitebeard outstrips Roger here because Whitebeard hits Maffy. He helps with Emu, and then he helps slightly with Dami Reversi Rocks, but not much, right? Whereas Roger, he helps stop Whitebeard, so he creates the opening for Rayleigh. He also helps with Emu, and then Roger and Garp do most of the work against Dami Reversi Rocks. So I don't think Whitebeard qualifies. Ginny assists with Morgans and sending messages. We're not going to count that. Isn't Sixth Man and assists very similar? No, Sixth Man is more related to your overall role and status in the conflict. Assists is like you can be both the MVP and the assists leader. You can't be the MVP and the Sixth Man. But why is it Whitebeard over Roger? Oh, fuck. I forgot. I have some differences from you guys. I got Dragon as Rookie of the Year. I think that's the only place I've got differences from you guys. Rayleigh for saving Roger and Shaki. Rayleigh did do a lot of assists. Wangzi for kidnapping Shaki in the first place? No. No, we've decided that saving Shaki in and of itself, saving the characters in and of themselves is not an assist. Assist is when you help another character do something else, right? Yeah, I think this might be Roger. I wanted Garp and Roger for Play of the Year. Yeah, that's true. But I feel like I'm giving it to them out of, like, because I want to give it to them. Emu Dami reversing Rocks is more impactful to the events. But you know what? I'll give it to Garp / Roger just because, you know what? I think it's cooler. And part of Play of the Year is, like, what you think is cooler. Harold did the least assists. Yeah, Harold got negative assists, actually. Ginny should be in contention for play of the year. Maybe it's too boring. Sending out the signal is too boring. I'm going to say for assists, we've got Roger, Whitebeard. We can put in Ginny. We can put in Ginny. Rattiest player of the year, Kaido versus Emu. I think you're thinking Kaido versus Big Mom, but that's up there with Garling, that's for sure. Roger, Whitebeard, and Ginny. Garling assists with Finding God Valley. That's technically true. $5 a.m. here in Morge's Live. Curious where that puts you. Hold on. 5. You know what? I don't need to look up all that. All right, we'll let it go a bit longer because it's pretty tight. Maffey for retrieving Shamrock. Yeah, I wonder why Garling wasn't more mad at her. Kind of just let that go. I'll give it 10 seconds. All right, we're going to give it to Roger. I feel like that makes sense because I just don't see how objectively you could give it to Whitebeard because their resumes are very similar. Roger just, because they did a lot of the same things, Roger just did more, right? Because Whitebeard helps out Dragon, incidentally, by taking out Maffey. Roger helps out Rayleigh by holding off Whitebeard, right? So that kind of evens out. Then Whitebeard helps Rocks with Emu. Roger helps Rocks with Emu, so that kind of cancels out. And then finally, I don't think Whitebeard against Rocks is very brief and isn't really an assist. But then Roger versus Rocks is very extensive and involves a lot of assists between him and Garp, right? So they have very similar resumes. I don't know what the argument would be for Whitebeard having given out more assists than Roger because what they do is so easily comparable. Okay. MVP. I've got Rocks as my MVP. Oh, Clefto the Boy Lip Wonder has a good question. We can vote on this afterwards. What team won God Valley, though? Rocks' crew, Roger's crew, Celestial Dragons / Marines, or Slaves? That's a good question. I think Roger's crew. In terms of their initial goals, I think Roger's crew comes out with it pretty good. I think in the grand scheme of things, you could argue that the Celestial Dragons might feel like they won the immediate victory in that they essentially ended their biggest problem, which was the Rocks Pirates. But it actually low-key spawned a whole bunch of bigger problems from them because this spawns Roger's journey. Now Garp knows what's up with the Marines and he's taken some strides and he's letting that out or whatever to Sengoku and stuff like that. And then Dragon, like the Revolutionary Army starts right here. Kuma's journey starts right here. All of the Rocks Pirates become more dangerous after they break up from Rocks and like start building their own empires. So it's kind of like they cut off the head of the snake, but then turned out to be a hydra, and 9 more heads popped up. So, I don't know. At the very least, they're lucky because most of the Yonko empires that rose up weren't as focused on trying to topple the world government, but a lot of them, that was their long-term vision. Like Kaido and Big Mom planned to eventually take over the world, stuff like that. I think it would make, like, this would be one where, like, the Celestial Dragons might feel like they came away the winners in the immediate aftermath, but then if you look at it in terms of what the actual fallout for this is, the biggest winner is definitely the Roger Pirates, because Rayleigh gets Shaki, which was the main, like, in terms of the 2 things that were kind of listed out as, like, the main goals everyone is after, Shaki and the treasure, the Roger Pirates make out like bandits, right? They get both of those things. Some Rocks Pirates get, like, scraps, but not, like, the Roger Pirates clearly get to hoard a lot of treasure for themselves. And then Roger Pirates also become the strongest crew on the ocean immediately after this, because, like, their previous rival was the Rocks Pirates, which now break apart. Yeah, I think it's got to be the Roger Pirates are the biggest winners, right? Let's see. Let's do the poll now. Group were the biggest winners from the incident. Rocks Pirates, Roger Pirates. Do we group Celestial Dragons and Marines together? I'll put them separate. Yeah, it's kind of clear cut, right? Roger Pirates kind of just wrecked. All right, MVP. So MVP, the only characters really in contention would be, I would say, obviously Rocks, Kuma. Rocks, Kuma. Who else is in? I consider Garp in contention because Garp had to. I view him as like a solo player, right? So it's kind of like because he was part of the Marines, but the Marines were a bunch of bums. So I thought it was kind of cool that Garp basically, like, everybody's playing on a team, but Garp has to show up pretty much solo because he's got like a bunch of G Leaguers or whatever. So in a sense, it's kind of like 2017 Russell Westbrook or something like that, you know? It's not like he's the best player on the field, but maybe he deserves MVP because, like, he had to show up and basically chase down, like, 3 Yonko at the same time, and, like, you know, then he gets thrown into a fight against God, and then he, and then he's holding down the fort fighting Dami Reversied Rocks. Like, Garp is the one with the least backup. He has to do a lot. So I feel like he should be in the conversation. Roger's the best player from the team that won. That's a good argument. And that's usually how MVP is decided. Best player on the best team. And we agreed that the Roger Pirates pretty much won. Not Emu, didn't damage anyone, and only Dami'd Rocks, which didn't even amount to much. Yeah, you could say Emu basically caused the defeat of Rocks, but it's in a roundabout way, right? All right, let's get our voting in. MVP, Kuma, Rocks. I'll say Garp. I can say Roger for the best player, best team argument. I don't think Roger has a great argument, though. All right, get your votes in. This is the important one. This looks like it's going to be pretty tight. I support the Kuma votes. I'm not going to push back against the Kuma votes. Kuma, underrated pick. He saved everyone. Kuma did save a lot of people. Rocks because he set in motion the events that will defeat the world government. Yeah, to some degree. To some degree. I think even Rocks would say Kuma is the MVP, not going to lie. I don't think Rocks would be proud of his showing at the end of all that. I think he'd feel ashamed that he got Dami reversied and all of that stuff happened. But I don't think that disqualifies the value that he showed over the course of that. And this is really tight. All right, everybody, get your votes in. I'll give it like 30 seconds. Eric, what's up, man? Thanks for the 5. Was Rocks' biggest mistake being selfish and not wanting to share the throne? If Harold knew about Emu, it would be different. I don't think that was his biggest mistake. I think, how to say this? I think it's actually kind of crazy, now that I think about it, that the implication is that Rocks didn't tell Harold about Emu. Because I think at the end of the day, Harold wouldn't even care about the throne. And I don't think Rocks ever thought that Harold cared about the throne. Harold just cared about the people of Elbaf being good. I think Rocks' bigger thing is that he wasn't able to convince Harold that, like, fighting the world government and defeating them would be the better route than Harold just trying to appease them and gain peace that way. Maybe Rocks thought that telling Harold about Emu wouldn't help convince him in that direction or anything like that. Or maybe it's too unbelievable to explain. Because he probably sounds like this crazy he's got no proof. He probably sounds like this crazy conspiracy theorist. Kind of like if I went to you right now, Eric, and I said, like, hey, I've seen behind the scenes, the world is controlled by this, like, crazy evil emperor from ancient times or something. You would probably have some difficulty believing that. Even if I was your friend or whatever, you probably would just look at the person like they're kind of crazy. And Harold was always kind of skeptical of Rocks and his dreams and ambitions and stuff like that. I think he always thought that Rocks was like a little bit off. All right, it looks like Kuma's winning this. We're giving this to Kuma for MVP. I'm going to throw my man Rocks a bone, and I'm going to give it to Rocks. I think that Kuma rightfully could be viewed as MVP, but listen, if you follow sports in general, definitely the NBA, you will know that every year there's lots of debate about who should win MVP. It's pretty much never unanimous. There's always, it's only been unanimous ever once. There's pretty much always at least one guy that's like, you know what, I'm going to give it to this other person because of what I value or whatever. In this case, I'll be that guy. I'm giving it to Rocks. My take, Rocks leading his whole crew there pretty much fucked everything up in the first place, so good shit. Then Rocks, obviously, I think like the entire final stand that he had against the Davy clan and all of the Gods Knights and Garling was amazing. Some of the most impressive stuff on God Valley, right? Then Rocks leading everybody to fight against Emu. You got to remember that everybody did end up taking their own shots against Emu, but Rocks really led the charge there. Yeah. And look, ultimately he didn't win, but MVPs don't always win. You know, ultimately he did lose. I think he did a lot. He did lose. But I'd say he was the most impactful character overall for this incident, taking into account everything. Him leading the crew there, his battle with the Gods Knights and Emu and everything like that. Even Dami reversing, he was still impactful. However you want to value that. Prophet Glutton says, Mort just wants to be different for the last one, lol. You know what it actually is? I think from the beginning, I was a little bit jaded against including Kuma in this discussion. If you watched the beginning of the stream, I was talking about that from the get-go. Not because I dislike Kuma as a character, but because for this, I was more interested in breaking down the story that we just got, like all the events that we just got here. Whereas Kuma's story was something that was like a long time ago that we experienced, like 2 years ago, really, right? So I wasn't really interested in delving back into Kuma's storyline here. I was trying to focus more on like, okay, out of the new storylines that we got at God Valley and this sort of like the battle that took place, right? Because Kuma wasn't really a part of the battle. Out of the battle that took place, I kind of wanted to see what people felt. But people still wanted to talk about Kuma. So from the beginning, I wasn't as hot on including Kuma in these discussions. But as you can still see, I gave Kuma Defensive Player of the Year. I should maybe have given Kuma Rookie of the Year if I was being fair, but I acknowledge that I'm not being the most fair to Kuma here. Again, not because I dislike the character, but just because I'm more focused on... I'm kind of trying to revisit the storyline that we just got, you know? Tio Treviso, thanks to 2. Did Harold betray Emu because he only wanted soldiers? Because he wanted only soldiers? I think it's very... Oh, Anuj Agrawal had a question before that. Let's do Anuj first, sorry. Anuj, thanks for the 5. What did Rox even accomplish in God Valley? Kuma did what Rox was there to do. I don't think Rox was... Oh, Rox was there to save his wife and child. So I think that's fair to point out. But at the same time, his wife and child got away initially because Rox got there, right? So it wasn't just Kuma. If you just left it to Kuma, then Eris and Teach would have died, right? Because they were being hunted by the Davy clan and the Gods Knights from the get-go. So Rox came in and he got them 90% of the way clear, right? To be fair, the last 10%, they were only in trouble because of Rox himself got Dami reversied, but it's not just thanks to Kuma that they got away. I think in general at God Valley, Rox brought his whole crew there. The raiding of God Valley was thanks to Rox, so I think there's that. I think taking on the entire Dami reversied Davy clan and the Gods Knights and everything, basically solo, like he was in a one-man versus an army type war while all the pirates were squabbling. I think that's pretty cool. I think fighting Emu one-on-one for a bit and basically leading the charge against Emu was pretty cool. And then he was very impactful while he was Dami Reversi, just not in a good way. So, you know, MVP can go to characters that lose. That's okay. So, did Harold betray Emu because he wanted only soldiers? I think Emu probably was hoping that Harold would turn the nation to an army of soldiers. That was kind of the plan from the get-go. Harold may have gone in the opposite direction of what Emu wanted. And maybe that's the betrayal. Or maybe there was some specific thing that Harold was secretly hiding that ended up being the betrayal. Eric, thanks for the 2. Do you think Rox had evil intent for the throne? I used to. Now I no longer think so. Now I think that the character of Rox, as we understand it, was supposed to be the opposite of what we were initially given. I think Rox wanting to reclaim the throne from Emu. This is actually talked about in a video that comes out tomorrow. Because I think when Rox first... was revealed as a villain and everything like that, I was like, he can't be a good guy at heart because he wants to take the throne. He wants to take over the world, yada, yada. That's inherently bad. I think one of the key things that we learned that was like the cherry on top of all of the information that we gained about Rox's noble qualities, his loyalty, his love, his willingness to sacrifice, his honor, right? The final piece that we learned, that was the missing piece to Rox's dream, was that Rox isn't just some dude who went out and was like, I want to take over the world. Rox is the rightful heir to the throne. It's the same as Momonosuke wanting to take back Wano from Orochi and Kaido because they took it initially from his father and from his grandfather, right? From Rox's perspective, but that doesn't mean that I personally believe in like birthright monarchies and stuff like that, but from the prior sort of morality that One Piece has pushed, the idea of there being like good, prosperous kingdom and king, etc., and then it being overthrown by evil character or whatever, One Piece generally sort of pitches it as like, well, the right thing is if the throne is sort of returned to the lineage that it's basically supposed to be passed down to or whatever, right? So Rox, it's basically explained in his final words too, he's trying to carry out the will of Davy, like the will of Davy Jones, the first king. He's trying to carry out his will. It wasn't like Rox just woke up one day and was like, I want to be king of the world or something like that. He knows that the world is in the wrong hands. He's trying to take it back from the person who took it from his forefather. That doesn't mean he was like, he isn't a liberator though. I just don't buy it. I think that you're looking at it I think you're sticking to the preconceived notion that we had about him, right? We don't know exactly what Rox's view for the world was, but the idea behind Rox, like Eric, just look at the final picture that we got about Rox. What we pretty much realize is that Rox is not Blackbeard. In fact, he's the opposite of Blackbeard in so many ways. We were just misled to believe that he's this evil, terrible character like Blackbeard, but he's not. In much the same way that Garling is the total opposite of Shanks. Garling is this heartless, conniving character, a character who will do dishonorable things like kill a fallen opponent by knifing them in the heart or whatever. Like, Garling's the total opposite of Shanks. Rox, in the same vein, is not like his son Blackbeard. They have some surface level personality similarities, like similar roguish sort of approach to things, But Rox has all of the things that Blackbeard lacks. And that leads me to believe that even if he wasn't going to, like, liberate the world necessarily, whatever that means, he wasn't going to create a world that's like Emu's. In another timeline, would Rox and Luffy be good friends? For sure. For sure. Just some guy with naturally wavy hair. Realistically, how strong do you think Garling is? Especially with Gorosei buffs, I think realistically, I gotta reevaluate some things now. I still think Garling is the strongest Gorosei. I think the Gorosei are just not as strong as I hoped for them to be. I think the Gorosei probably all range within Admiral territory. I don't think Garling would be... Because, like... Yonko, I think, are a pretty tight group, in my opinion, at this point. I think characters like... let's put it this way. If we were to say that Rayleigh... I think Rayleigh takes Garling, personally. I think Rayleigh takes Garling. I think Prime Gaban... I don't think Garling is their level. I also think Kaido, Prime Big Mom, Shanks, Mihawk, Dragon, I think these characters take Garling. So I'm just like, do I think Garling is in the Yonko conversation? No. So, we don't know. Maybe we find out later that Garling is just crazy, crazy strong, and then that just hypes up Rox even further. I don't know. Eric says, yeah, I get it, but he's so secretive for no reason to his crew/friends. It's weird because, turns out Rox was a good friend. His crew wanted to back him up at the end. I think Rox was genuinely a good guy, and he just had a shitty group of people around him for the most part, like Shiki, Ganzui, etc., right? And Rox was a great friend to Harold. Rox's final words to Emu before he's Dami Reversied are still defending Harold all the way down to the end. You can say Rox was dumb for not telling that stuff, or he was too secretive to his crew and friends, but I'm going to be honest, I've said this a million times before with One Piece, and it's just something I've grown to accept. Oda's strength is not covering every logical plot hole. It's not that. His strength is not covering every logical thing. Ultimately, what Oda wanted was this grand friendship between Rox and Harold, with both of them being two characters at the pinnacle of strength in the world, but one of them trying to fight the world government and one of them believing that the path is to appease the world government, right? That was the falling out that Oda, that was the friendship that he wanted to form and the falling out that he wanted to write, right? So when that's the case, Oda's just not going to spend time on, the nitty-gritty details of, well, did Rox present... we never even get to see all of the arguments that Rox presents to Harold and Harold's breakdown of why those arguments don't make sense or don't follow with Elbaf's plan, right? That's something you might see in something like Hunter x Hunter or a different... there's a lot of different series that you might see that. In One Piece, Oda kind of just plants the idea that these two, they just... different ideals, it just doesn't work out or whatever. That's just the way it is. It's kind of Garp and Dragon's final conversation. Sengoku and Garp's conversation. You kind of want a lot more out of Garp and Sengoku's conversation where it's no, debate these things. To break down the merits. What are you talking about? What am I talking about? You kind of want to see that on paper, but Oda kind of just has them do a little fist fight and be I just stand for something different. You stand for something different. I think One Piece is a series that's just does not delve into a lot of the logical things that characters maybe should say or should share. I don't even remember Robin didn't even tell Luffy about Sabo and stuff or whatever. I guess maybe Sabo didn't want her to tell him, but I don't know. There's a million things. Yeah. One Piece is about the feels. Kaido seemed to like him at the end. Yeah, I mean, the only time that Rox was a dick to Kaido was when Kaido suggested that Rox murder his best friend, which Kaido should get his ass whooped for. You kind of... at the end of the day, that didn't make Rox a bad guy. If anything, Kaido, as we know, is a really shitty guy who considers slavery to be okay, and enslaving entire nations, or violence for any reason or whatever. Kaido was the bad egg in that crew. It's kind of good that Rox was like, no, we're not going with your fucking shitty morality or whatever here, right? I don't think Rox should have points deduct. I went through the backstory. The only moment of the entire backstory that Rox actually does something that's like on the shittier side is when he beats up Loki. But then you look at it and it's like, well, Loki's also like a fucking ancient giant kid, and Rox isn't fucking dumb. Like, Rox knows he's not killing Loki doing this. So Rox's a bit of a dick. That's what you can say. At the very least, at the start of his story, he's a bit of a dick. But it's not like it's not like he's beating like a cute little baby or something like that. It's like an ancient giant kid, the prince of the giants or whatever. Rox probably has like a certain standard. He's like, I'm not going to go easy on Harold's kid. And then Rox does build actually a genuinely good relationship with Loki. It was something that we didn't see on screen that much, but the final flashback that we got in the latest chapter showcased that Rox and Loki did actually have talks and stuff, and Rox did actually try to communicate a little bit of like wisdom to Loki, trying to explain a little bit things that Loki couldn't understand about love and stuff like that. You know, Luffy also beat up Kobe. Yeah, it's kind of just like Garp beat up fucking Ace, Luffy, and Sabo as kids. Like, in One Piece, if a character judges a kid character to be strong enough, they do that, you know? Luffy beat up Momonosuke a lot, you know? Rox is a morally gray character, but does have a dark side. I'd steer clear of Rox IRL. I can understand a man trying to save his family and respect his friends, but that's far from the end-all be-all. I think that a lot of our view of Rox is still colored by what we were initially told of Sengoku. I can say this. Rox has never actually committed any sort of truly evil act, but he has done a lot of acts in the story that are things that we normally commend One Piece characters for doing. We learned that even his rampaging force of evil, they didn't even rob good guys. Rox actually was one of those pirates that only targeted organizations, from what we were shown, only targeted organizations that were like evil organizations themselves, like fake charities that are hoarding money and stuff like that. Like, I think Oda did a lot to try to... He didn't try to make Rox this like golden, kind-hearted character or something like that. He didn't try to do that, but he basically established that the things that Rox is loving, loyal, willing to put his own ambitions aside for things that matter more. He is strongly bound by a code of honor and does not break those boundaries, even if it would make him, even if it would allow him to pursue his goals more easily, right? And he's very prideful and honorable when it comes to how he approaches his plans, right? He will step up and fight Imu by himself if need be when it comes down to it. Like, he won't back down from those moments. He will take them on head on. He has a lot of pride and honor as a warrior that we've seen between his interactions with Harold, all of that. There aren't actually any truly damning points about Rox, other than he's like a bit of a rogue, but nothing worse than a lot of the normalized pirates that we've seen. He's obviously not as good and kind as Luffy, but he's not like it's not even close to Kaido. Kaido enslaved an entire nation. And Kaido's a backstabbing son of a bitch, as we saw with the whole Big Mom situation. Didn't a nation disappear because of the Rocks pirates? Yeah, but like, you could say a lot about that, about Luffy's stuff, as even Kenny1352 says this. Yeah, same thing. You can vaguely describe Luffy's actions. In terms of what Oda actually shows us of the character, it's all to dissuade from the notion that Rox was actually a bad guy. Because if Oda was trying to establish that Rox is a bad guy, then he would never even have written the whole thing about like, don't steal from us, we're a charity. And it's like, no, you guys are hoarding the money, you guys are bad guys. Oda would have just had Rox steal from like some actually good, innocent characters or something. But he never has the Rocks pirates ever actually do anything like that. Eric saying, what would you say is his dramatic flaw? So for a lot of these flashback characters, Oda's not necessarily trying to highlight their dramatic flaw, right? He's actually usually trying to highlight that they're good to a fault in a way. Like, for example, Bellemere wasn't, like, she didn't have some, like, gaping hole in her morality or something like that, right? Her flaw was basically, like, down to the final moments, she could not deny that she had a family that she loved, right? Tom, he was going to get off scot-free, but he wanted to teach Frankie the value of, like, understanding the value of, like, taking pride in your creation. So Tom's taking the fall for Frankie's ships and everything like that, right? For a lot of these characters who have this sort of fatal end, or, like, this dramatic, tragic end, it's because they're good to a fault. See Otahime, see so many One Piece characters, right? With Rocks, his faults, like, that brought him down at the end were that he was too loyal and too loving. That was the story of Rocks. That he succumbed to those two things, right? Because the idea behind him was that he was most on a roll towards the beginning of his story, right? When he was on the beginning of the story, just focused on his ambitions, focused on, like, okay, I'm going to get I've amassed my empire, my crew, all the strongest characters are coming around me. I know what I need next. I need these two fruits. I need the Galila. But Rox is presented with these obstacles in the form of other relations, right? It suggested that, hey, if you need that fruit, why don't you just, like, kill Harold and take it by force? That is technically always an option, right? Rox could lead the Rox pirates to basically kill Harold and Elbaf, right? He has the manpower to do it, considering the Elbaf giants outside of Harold kind of suck. And at worst, he could try and betray Harold and do it in a sneaky way, right? That's what Blackbeard would do. Blackbeard would 100% orchestrate a situation like he did with Thatch, like he did with Whitebeard, where it's like, well, I need that fruit, I'm going to seize it, right? But Rox was genuine in his friendship with Harold. He's like, no, I want Harold on my side. I want him on my side. I don't want him. I dream of us two as a duo taking down Emu. I'm not going to get the fruit from him by force. I'm going to do it the right way with Harold agreeing, right? So that was flaw number one. Flaw number two was love, which was at a certain point, Rox fell in love. He got a wife. He got a child. And that's when he threw everything that he built away. He says going into God Valley, he's like, I can tell that this is not a good idea. I don't think fortune is on my side going in there. But if I get my wife and child, nothing else matters. Going into God Valley, he's even telling his crew, like, we're all probably going to break up after this. Like, he knows his crew. He knows that they're all going to split, abandon him. He's not under any presumptions. He gives Harold an olive branch at the end. Harold rejects it. He knows Rox knows he's going in to basically a suicide mission with this whole Rox Valley or God Valley incident. But he goes in anyway. And Eris even tells him, like, you lost to Emu. Why'd you lose to Emu? She spells it out because you fought him before you were ready in order to save us. Oda's very blatant with the messaging there. It's like, you put us before your goals and vision, right? And that's ultimately Rox's biggest dramatic failing. He's too honorable, too loyal, too loving. Eric, with a great question. I don't disagree, but the choice to give him a pathetic death and not a hero's one makes me think about the messaging. Watch tomorrow's video, man. That is actually almost to a T what tomorrow's video addresses. That's what that's how I felt too initially, but then I reread the flashback and Oda's pre-framing of the character, and it made a lot more sense. Taptio Treviso says, you think Harold would have become Nika if he never met Ida? I think that Harold... In One Piece, things are often not perfect, right? Like, so Oda likes to present certain ideals that can go too far in many ways, but it's important that those ideals be introduced, right? So Ida basically convinces Harold of, like, pure pacifism. Like, nothing in the world is meant to be destroyed is what she teaches him, right? That takes Harold in too far off the other direction, right? World government needs to be destroyed. Celestial dragons need to be destroyed, stuff like that. But he becomes too pacifistic with that. At the same time, the idea is that it is ultimately better that he went down that route. I don't think Harold is... I think Oda's implication is that Harold is supposed to ultimately be a better person after having met Ida and learned from Ida than who he was before. Because, look, maybe if Harold hadn't met Ida, then yeah, he'd be down to go to war and fight and everything like that, right? But the whole reason that Harold became focused on trying to ingratiating Elbaf with the rest of the outside world and such is because he learned the value of other people, other places. He learned the value of trade and wanting to connect their societies, right? So let's say Harold had never met Ida. In that case, Elbaf would still be a nation of like absolutely ruthless barbarian warriors who only go around destroying other countries, right? So let's say you have that version of Harold meet Rox. If you have that version of Harold meet Rox, one, maybe Rox himself wouldn't want to team up with Harold. If he's like, well, this is what I'm unleashing upon the world, which is just a race of like bloodthirsty barbarians that just have no regard for human life and destroy everything, right? That might be worse. It's possible Harold wouldn't want to team up with Rox. Or if they did team up, then, well, actually, there's another caveat to that. But let's say they did team up. If that's the case, then it's not actually making the world a better place. Because the Giants of Elbaf are still fundamentally a fucked up country, right? And giving them leeway to basically be a big part in, like, changing the world probably is pretty fucking bad for humans as well. The last part is, it's very possible that Harold wouldn't even be able to make friends with Rox in the first place if he didn't have Ida's influence. Because Harold beforehand was a very aggressive, headstrong, violent character, right? I think the reason that Rox and Harold's friendship works is because the two personalities are different, right? You've got Harold, who's now the more peaceful, sort of like easygoing personality, while Rox is this brash, big talking character who's telling Harold about like, oh, we're gonna do this and this and this and this, right? And Harold's kind of just the more calm, mature one who's able to kind of take it all in and being like, I don't know about all that, right? You need some sort of, I think if you have two straight up like, you know how like when Luffy and Kid first met and then they butted heads right away, right? I think that could have been the case with Rox and Harold if Harold hadn't been mellowed out by Ida beforehand. Or like Roger and Garp. Whenever Roger and Garp used to meet on the seas, they'd butt heads, right? I think, on the other hand, Roger and Whitebeard, why did Roger and Whitebeard always get along from the get-go? Like, Roger and Rox would butt heads, Roger and Garp would butt heads, Roger and Whitebeard didn't butt heads. Why? Not because Whitebeard's not this super strong Conqueror's Haki user, but because Whitebeard's more mature and mellowed out. That's all it is. Like, Whitebeard's just like, I'm not, like... He's just more mature and mellowed out as a character, which is why, like, you know, Roger shows up at the bar and he's like, I want to drink with Whitebeard, and Whitebeard's like, I don't even want to fucking drink with any of y'all. Y'all are fucking idiots. Anyway, Taptia Treviso, thanks for the 10. You think that Blackbeard will dominate reverse the Celestial Dragons after he kills Emu? That would be so sick. That's what they would deserve. I like that. It would be a way to deal with the morality, with also the idea of cycles with Celestial Dragons going from gods to demons in a simple action. That's a great idea, man. Love that idea. Great idea. Maybe that happens. I love that idea. All right, guys. I think we are going to probably wrap it up because I do want to eat my dinner soon. Yeah. I like our picks for the most part. We generally agreed. Maybe I had some slight anti-Kuma bias, but, you know, I acknowledge it. If it's just, I wanted to talk about the story we just read, and not as much delve back into Egghead. But yeah, all right, everybody. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and definitely, if you got a lot of thoughts about Rox stuff and general Rox character analysis, watch out for tomorrow's video.